On June 25th, if you'll recall, a cargo ship rammed the Mir and struck the Spectre module, a very strong blow that is believed to have punctured the hull. CNN's John Holloman now visited the factory where Mir was built in Russia, and he explains how the spacewalk is going to be carried out.
The cosmonauts on Mir are preparing for another spacewalk inside the damaged Spectre module. This is where they rehearse that spacewalk. It's a full-scale model of the entrance to Spectre, and they went all over it, preparing the various things they were going to have to do to get renewed power and control cables connected to Spectre's solar panels. The spacewalk is scheduled to start at midday Monday, Moscow time, and last for more than 5 hours. Cosmonauts Anatoly Solovyev and Pavel Vinogradov will open the hatch to Spectre and try to find control cables for the solar panels outside. 3 of those panels still produce electricity, but they can't be steered toward the sun. The 4th was severely damaged and will probably be removed later. If they find the cables, the cosmonauts will attach them to an orientation computer in an undamaged part of Mir.
To do this will require hooking up some control lines, control cables, inside the module.
While the cosmonauts are in their spacesuits, astronaut Dave Wolf will be in shirt sleeves in the rescue ship, just in case the spacewalk goes terribly wrong.
I will be in the Soyuz capsule during this. In the event that none of us can re-enter the station if a hatch should not close properly, and we will use one of the segments of the Soyuz module as an airlock to bring in Pavel and Anatoly, and then we will all have to abort the mission and come home in the Soyuz if we cannot re-enter the station itself.
If the spacewalk is successful, Mir, which has been limping along on partial power since the June 25th accident, will be back at near full power levels. More electricity translates into the ability for Wolf to do more science experiments, in addition to helping his crewmates keep Mir alive. John Holloman, CNN, Moscow.
Thanks for joining us. A repair mission aboard the Russian space station Mir has become another race against the clock, and this time it looks like the clock won. CNN's John Holloman is in Moscow, and he brings us up to date with the latest. John?
Jonathan, this was kind of a tense last hour up in space. There was not a lot of communication between the Mir space station and the ground, and we knew that the spacesuits were going to run out of air after 5 hours and 40 minutes. Well, they did run out of air at that point, but the cosmonauts managed to get back into Mir's airlock area where they have a connection, where they can take a pipe on the spacesuit and plug it in to Mir's main air supply. So that's what they did. They spent an extra hour outside trying to connect three cable connectors that are about this big around to a plate on the back of Spectre's hatch that has about, I guess 30 different places, little jacks that you can plug a connector into. They got the first 2 on just fine, but they were getting so tired, and the hassle of disconnecting from spacesuit air and going to Mir space station air took up so much time they didn't get the 3rd one connected. Vladimir Solovyev, who is the flight director for the Russian space agency and the Mir space program, just concluded a news conference just a couple minutes ago. He made a lot of announcements about what happened. He said, we got 2 out of the 3 connectors connected. He said, that's 2/3 of the work done. We got 1 main solar panel hooked up to a computer that will automatically steer it from here on out, and 1 secondary solar panel hooked up. It's going to increase Mir's power supply. They're not exactly sure how much. They'd hope to boost the power supply by 20 or 30%. They probably got 10 or 15% from doing 2 out of the 3 solar panels. What will happen is that as Mir floats through space, these solar panels, all the other solar panels on Mir automatically steer toward the sun. All the ones on Spectre don't, because they've been hooked up to a computer which doesn't work without any air in Spectre. So they've rerouted the cables back to another computer that's in a place where there is air, and that computer ought to be able to steer those things, keep them going toward the sun so the batteries never run out of power, and the space station operates much more efficiently. But anyway, Solovyev at his news conference said the crew was very frustrated by the fact they didn't get all this work finished. He said that they were very tired, that was one reason, and the job was very painstaking. Solovyev pointed out to the reporters at Mission Control, it's a lot easier to move something big in the Russian spacesuit than it is to operate something very tiny. The reason is the suit is bulky. The gloves are I mean, they're huge. I've been out at the spacesuit factory with the astronauts who were training in the suits, and it's very difficult to move the fingers in the spacesuit from outside, much less from inside when you're under the pressure of the spacesuit itself. So the crew was frustrated by this. Tough to work in spacesuits. Solovyov says he doesn't think they'll go back in and try to connect that third cable. They got enough extra power by connecting 2 out of the 3 to pretty much solve Mir's power problems. What they've had to do ever since June 25th, when they had virtually no power, was operate just a very few things at a time. With this extra power, they'll be able to operate most of the systems at the same time, bringing Mir back, at least power-wise, to what it was before the accident almost. For the cosmonauts, 2 days of rest. Solovyov called it 1 day of honest rest and 1 day of semi-honest rest. They got a lot of reports to fill out and things to fax down to the ground tomorrow. They have been up for 21 hours, and the last 7, 8 of those hours have been very hard work. Big news for people who care about astronauts on Mir. David Wolf, it was just announced, will be conducting a spacewalk outside Mir in probably early to mid-November. He's going to go out, and we believe he's going to go out with Mir's flight engineer, Pavel Vinogradov. Wolf is trained for this in the water tank in Moscow. He's going to take some U.S. experiments and attach them to the outside of the space station. There'll be one more spacewalk before that. In fact, it's going to be spacewalk, spacewalk, spacewalk every few days until early December on Mir. Going to make the job of people who do what I do kind of interesting for the next, in the pre-Christmas period. And for those people on Mir, even more exciting. Everybody's back inside. They're repressurizing. Everybody's safe now. And it's been a very long and, at least for the cosmonauts, frustrating day in Mir. John?
John Holman in Moscow. Thanks very much. Hillary?
Station Mir, and the job wasn't completely finished. 2 Russian cosmonauts ventured inside the damaged Spectre module Monday to make crucial repairs. They managed to hook up 2 of 3 solar panels, but were unable to make the final connection needed to send computer signals to align the 3rd panel with the sun. CNN's John Holman is in Russia and brings us this report.
An inside spacewalk to boost the power available to the Mir crew took an hour longer than expected and was pretty much successful. To Russian mission controllers, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. The cosmonauts Anatoly Solovyov and Pavel Vinogradov had a tough job. Return to Mir's airless Spectre module filled with debris and connect the 3 working solar panels to a computer at the other end of the space station. Spectre's computer won't work in the absence of air, and the cabin is still leaking. 7.5 hours after it started, the boss at Mission Control announced the news.
We wanted to connect all 3 solar arrays to the orientation system and managed to achieve 2/3 of that goal, allowing us now to obtain a more optimal amount of solar energy on the station. Even so, the crew was, of course, frustrated.
Not only frustrated, but also exhausted. The cosmonauts will get 2 days off after its 22-hour day. For David Wolf, who spent this entire spacewalk in the Soyuz rescue ship, there was good news at the end. He is going outside Mir in the Russian spacesuit.
David Wolf will be participating in the 3rd EVA. That's the 3rd EVA from today. That will be a Russian-American spacewalk. And they will be spending their time exclusively setting up American scientific equipment.
It will be multiple spacewalks for the Mir crew, at least for the next couple of months. They have a minimum of 4 spacewalks scheduled between now and mid-December. John Holman, CNN, Moscow.
Station Mir heute Morgen zu einem weiteren Weltraumspaziergang gestartet. Schuld an der Verzögerung war ein Defekt am Raumanzug von Mir-Kommandant Anatoly Solovyov. An dem Anzug war ein Druck- und Temperaturmessgerät ausgefallen. Obwohl das Gerät noch immer nicht funktioniert, drängte Solovyov darauf, ins All geschickt zu werden. Während ihres 5-stündigen Einsatzes sollen er und ein weiterer Kosmonaut ein abgenutztes Sonnensegel einholen.
Russischen Raumstation Mir haben heute während eines 6-stündigen Außenbordeinsatzes erfolgreich Reparaturarbeiten durchgeführt. Zu Beginn setzten sie einen kleinen künstlichen Satelliten aus, ein Modell des vor 40 Jahren gestarteten ersten sowjetischen Sputniks. Es war von russischen und französischen Schülern gebaut worden. Außerdem montierten die Kosmonauten ausgedehnte Solarzellen ab. Sie sollen morgen ersetzt werden. Die Flugleitzentrale nahe Moskau sprach trotz Ausfalls eines Messcomputers von einem problemlosen Arbeitseinsatz.
Der russischen Mir haben bei Reparaturarbeiten im freien Weltraum einen neuen Sonnenkollektor installiert. Dadurch soll die Energieversorgung der Raumstation verbessert werden. Nach anfänglichen Schwierigkeiten öffneten die Kosmonauten das Sonnensegel per Hand. Das war bereits der zweite Ausflug ins All innerhalb von 4 Tagen.
Solar panel is bringing the Russian space station Mir back to full power. The panel replaces one damaged in a June crash with the cargo ship. 2 Russian cosmonauts walked in space to complete the repair project. CNN's John Holloman has the latest developments.
The cosmonauts have spent about 12 hours outside their space station this week, making repairs to Mir. Flight engineer Pavel Vinogradov at the top of your screen led his commander Anatoly Solovyov in the red striped suit into the vacuum of space for the second time in 3 days. The result of the walks is a little more electrical energy to supply the experiments being conducted by astronaut Dave Wolf inside the space station. For Commander Solovyov, the Thursday morning walk was especially important. It was his 14th, cementing his record as the most experienced spacewalker in history. The cosmonauts moved a large box which had been attached to the red docking tunnel at one end of Mir. Inside that box is a replacement solar panel for a worn-out solar array, which was removed over the weekend. It was attached at the other end of the space station. After it was connected, astronaut Dave Wolf inside Mir ordered it to unfold, and it did. Moments later, it started generating electricity, bringing the Russian station back to nearly full power. For Wolf, more power means he can operate his science experiments for more hours each day. Now that this spacewalk is done, Wolf will begin preparing in earnest for his walk outside Mir. It's now scheduled for the first week in December.
We have a number of pieces of scientific equipment on the external of the spaceship measuring the long-term effects on the material spacecraft are constructed of, and we need to bring those instruments back in to get much of their data, and also take some new data on the surface coatings using a reflectance measuring device that understands the surface properties after long exposures to space.
The next big job for the threesome will be installing a second carbon dioxide removal machine. That will provide an extra margin of safety on the 11-year-old space station. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Roll in space. They put up a replacement solar panel on this spacewalk after removing an aging panel from outside Mir 3 days ago. The mission should complete months of repairs to Mir's power supply system.
Weltraum. Die Crew der pannengeplagten russischen Raumstation Mir hat heute weitere Reparaturen im All vorgenommen. Es ist der zweite Einsatz der Kosmonauten Solovyov und Vinogradov innerhalb von 4 Tagen. Ziel war es, einen beschädigten Sonnenkollektor an der Außenhaut des Forschungsmoduls Quant auszutauschen. Dadurch soll die Energieversorgung der Raumstation verbessert werden.
Die Besatzung der Mir hat ein neues Sonnensegel installiert. Und wieder hat es erstmal nicht funktioniert. Die Kosmonauten mussten es per Hand öffnen. Jetzt aber ist die Energieversorgung der Raumstation gesichert. Der Einsatz im All hätte keine Minute länger dauern dürfen. Die Sauerstoffreserven wären fast verbraucht.
Typ Progress ist heute erfolgreich zur russischen Raumstation Mir gestartet. Pünktlich um 9:45 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hob eine Sojus-Rakete mit der Kapsel an Bord vom kasachischen Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. Die Progress bringt frische Lebensmittel, Treibstoff und eine neue Dichtung für die Ausstiegsluke der Mir zur Raumstation. Und, ganz wichtig, Weihnachtsgeschenke für die Crew.
Mit Kurs auf Mir gestartet. Pünktlich um 9:45 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hob die Rakete mit dem Progress-Transporter vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. An Bord ein wichtiges Ersatzteil für die defekte Ausstiegsluke der Mir. Außerdem 2,5 Tonnen Versorgungsgüter. Am Montagmittag soll das Frachtschiff, das auch Weihnachtsgeschenke für die Crew geladen hat, an die Mir andocken.
Vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ist heute die Transportkapsel Progress M37 zur Mir gestartet. Sie bringt rund 2,5 Tonnen Lebensmittel, Wasser, Treibstoff sowie Weihnachtsgeschenke für die Crew ins All. Außerdem hat die Progress eine neue Dichtung im Gepäck für die seit dem 3. November undichte Ausstiegsluke der Mir. Die Transportkapsel soll am Montag an die Raumstation andocken.
Inspektor ist zu weit weg. Ein Fehlschlag, kommt drauf an, wie man es sieht. Das Experiment sei gar kein Fehlschlag gewesen, heißt es in einer ersten Stellungnahme am Boden. Es sei nur nicht 100%ig gelungen. Dialektik der besonderen Art. Inspektor tut, typisch deutsch derweil, weiter tapfer Dienst. Auch wenn die Mir inzwischen meilenweit weg ist, sendet er unentwegt. bis ihm der Saft ausgeht. Das aber kann Jahre dauern. Schließlich ist das fliegende Auge auch als Weltraumschrott noch echte deutsche Wertarbeit.
The satellite has missed the mark. The satellite went into the wrong orbit when a rocket booster did not fire long enough. The telecommunications satellite was supposed to provide communication coverage to the area shown here. Officials with the Hong Kong company that owns it say the stray satellite poses no danger to anyone.
Nachdem ein Triebwerk der Rakete versagt hatte, konnte der Satellit nicht in die richtige Umlaufbahn gelangen. Die russische Raumfahrtbehörde erklärte, es sei noch unklar, ob der Satellit zur Erde stürzen oder vorher in der Atmosphäre verglühen werde.
Genau um 1:19 Uhr heute Nacht hob die gewaltige russische Proton-Rakete vom Weltraumbahnhof Baikonur ab. Die Auftraggeber aus Hongkong hatten sich für diese Rakete entschieden, weil sie besonders zuverlässig, präzise und preisgünstig sei. Umso größer im Kontrollzentrum 6 Stunden später die Bestürzung, als ein Triebwerk der Rakete versagt und der 2,5 Tonnen schwere Nachrichtensatellit auf eine falsche Umlaufbahn gerät. Eine 70 Millionen Dollar Pleite. Nach 2 Monaten, so heißt es, wird der Satellit auseinanderbrechen und in Einzelteilen zur Erde stürzen. Auf einer eilig einberufenen Pressekonferenz heute Nachmittag versuchten die Auftraggeber abzuwiegeln. Fehler kämen in der Weltraumtechnik immer vor, man müsse eben nach den Ursachen suchen. Doch in Russlands Weltraumtechnik häufen sich die Fehler. Vor genau einem halben Jahr waren die russischen Raumschiffe Mir und Progress zusammengestoßen, wobei nicht nur Weltraumschrott entstand, sondern die Besatzung der Mir in eine lebensbedrohliche Situation geriet. Die erneute Panne in der russischen Raumfahrt passt genau zur allgemeinen Stimmung in Russland. Nicht nur der Raumfahrt, so ist hier immer häufiger zu hören, ging es zu Sowjetzeiten besser, sondern auch der Mehrheit der Bevölkerung. Nach einer heute veröffentlichten Umfrage bedauern inzwischen mehr als 60% der russischen Bevölkerung den Zerfall der Sowjetunion. Und trotz der zum Jahreswechsel festlich geschmückten Straßen in Moskau blicken die meisten Russen pessimistisch in die Zukunft.
Cargo ship arrived at Mir on Monday with a load of supplies, and the crew will be busy unloading it. The supplies include a new seal for the door to one module, which is leaking. Installing the new seal is the main purpose for the January 6th spacewalk. Another spacewalk is set for about a week later.
Der Erde das journalistische Sommerloch gähnt, ist wenigstens im Kosmos was los. Ein Raumtransporter rammt die betagte russische Raumstation Mir. Monatelang hat der Westen jetzt nur noch Augen für das kleine Bröckchen Russland im All. Die Station kommt immer wieder ins Trudeln, der Computer spielt verrückt. Die Mir ist eigentlich für wissenschaftliche Experimente da, aber bald wird hier nur noch erforscht, wie man kaputte Raumstationen flickt. Alle, die schon immer meinten, die russische Technik sei Schrott, fühlen sich jetzt bestätigt. Dabei ist es eher ein Wunder, dass die 11 Jahre alte Mir so lange funktioniert hat. Ende September bringen amerikanische Astronauten einen neuen Computer vorbei. Der alte war noch von 1986. Es fehlt einfach am Geld. Die Lage auf der Mir ist ernst, aber wo wäre sie das nicht in Russland? Beim Spacewalk gratulieren die Kosmonauten zum Geburtstag ihrer Hauptstadt Moskau.
45 Raketenstarts binnen 6 Jahren, der erste im nächsten Juni. So soll das bislang aufwendigste Raumfahrtprojekt Wirklichkeit werden. Eine internationale Station im All, in der Amerikaner und Russen, Deutsche, Franzosen oder Japaner gemeinsam leben und forschen werden, sobald sie im Jahr 2003 komplett ist. Ein gewaltiges Vorhaben mit 2 äußerst ungleichen Hauptbeteiligten. Russlands Kosmonauten haben ein katastrophales Jahr hinter sich. Nur mit Mühe retteten sie ihre zerbeulte Raumstation Mir, in der es schwere Pannen zuhauf gab. Russland präsentierte sich nicht gerade als idealer Partner im All. Währenddessen feierte die US-Raumfahrt einen Triumph nach dem anderen. Vor allem die Landung auf dem Mars im Sommer war ein großer Erfolg. Eine mit 450 Millionen Mark vergleichsweise billige Mission zeigte den roten Planeten, wie ihn die Menschheit noch nicht gesehen hatte. 500 Millionen Mal wurden die Marsbilder übers Internet abgerufen. Und das ist der Blick in die unergründlichen Weiten des Universums. Galaxien aufgenommen vom Hubble-Teleskop. Auch das Weltallobservatorium sorgte für Superlative. Und dennoch mehrt sich sogar in den USA die Zahl derer, die sagen, solche Projekte seien zwar schön, aber leider zu teuer. Wenn man die Probleme sieht, die wir hier auf der Erde haben, dann ist das alles eine fürchterliche Geldverschwendung, sagt dieser Washingtoner Senator. Immerhin soll die Laborplattform mehr als 100 Milliarden Mark kosten, zu der übrigens auch Deutschland ein Labormodul namens Columbus beisteuert. Investitionen, die sich aber lohnen, wie die Beteiligten beteuern.
Man hat zum einen diesen politischen Aufbruch jetzt geschafft, dass Länder, die vorher verfeindet waren, zusammenarbeiten, zum anderen aber auch technisch dann erstmals die Möglichkeit, kontinuierlichen Zugang zu einem Labor im All zu haben.
Das wird dann zwar die teuersten Arbeitsplätze aller Zeiten beinhalten, doch wann ziehen die Großen der Welt schon einmal zusammen an einem Strang? Schon deshalb wird mit der Raumstation Alpha so ein bisschen ein Menschheitstraum Wirklichkeit.
Over here is actually your signal is at the pulse or your panel that gives you all your caution and warning alarms. And we've seen a few of those throughout time on my stay in the last 4.5 months, so this has been a busy panel. The fire, I guess, is kind of interesting. People have heard about the fire. The fire was basically in this region here with the flame shooting across this way. And the things that I think pretty much saved our lives are these oxygen breathing devices. And during the fire, of course, that had to go on quickly.
It is being reported by NASA that there has been now an incident on board the Russian space station Mir. Apparently, a supply ship that was bound for the Mir space station has collided with the space station.
The 3 men aboard the Russian space station Mir were in the middle of testing their docking system when the Russian cargo ship Progress crashed into one of Mir's 6 modules. At Moscow's mission control, the latest crisis resulted in shouting between the Mir crew and its ground controllers. One Russian manager compared Mir to a kindergarten and its crew to children.
There have been enough accidents. It cannot be blamed on one crew. In my opinion, it comes from the ground with our economy and the state of our affairs. In general, everything is being done in a very lean way. Even vital supplies are not being sent. Factories are not working. If they do, they ask lots of money for it. So lots of things needed on the station are not there.
It may not be a regularly scheduled event, but once again, for the 4th time since July, Mir's computer is in trouble, the spacecraft is adrift, and non-essential systems have been switched off to save power. Once again, the men in Russian mission control assure that, quote, everything is under control, there is, quote, nothing serious.
Does someone have to get killed before NASA and the Russian Space Agency wake up?
Until the International Space Station is flying, despite the questions of safety, Mir is the only show in town. And the Russians are right when they say the only place to learn about space is in space.
I remember when I was little watching the first satellites go over. But what's about to happen in space seems even more amazing. To put a space station into orbit, astronauts from 13 countries living there up to 10 years, that's a pretty great achievement. I'm John Donor, and I work at Mobile. I developed the grease that will lubricate the International Space Station's air system. We might take breathing for granted on Earth, but it's very important for them. I feel very proud for Mobile that we are a part of that.
Im 5. Kontinent begrüßte ein Feuerregen das neue Jahr. Wie immer beging man Down Under den Jahreswechsel mit einem komfortablen Vorsprung. In allen Regenbogenfarben erleuchtet der Hafen von Sydney, wo Zehntausende traditionell die Ufer säumten, um das Spektakel aus nächster Nähe zu verfolgen. Freundlich lachend sehen die Australier 1998 entgegen. Etwas bescheidener fällt das Fest an Bord der russischen Raumstation Mir aus. Sekt ist in der Schwerelosigkeit verboten, daher muss dort die Attrappe reichen. Die 2 russischen Kosmonauten und ihr amerikanischer Kollege können sich eigentlich aussuchen, wann sie den Jahreswechsel feiern, schließen sich jedoch den Kollegen in Moskau an. Die Neujahrsgrüße aus dem All gab es aber schon mal vorab.
Happy New Year.
A wish for peace on Earth from CNN International.
It's not a big problem. They say there are spare parts on board for repairs, and if all goes well in the next 3 to 4 hours, the computer will then be rebooted and all the power should be restored by sometime late tomorrow.
Last year, Mir experienced 7 computer breakdowns.
Heute ist der zentrale Bordcomputer ausgefallen. Die Flugleitzentrale teilte mit, die Station habe ihre Idealposition zur Sonne verloren. Deshalb erzeugten die Sonnenkollektoren weniger Strom. Der Computer war erst im November auf der Mir eingebaut worden.
Raumstation Mir ist schon wieder der Bordcomputer ausgefallen. Das Gerät war erst vor 6 Wochen ausgetauscht worden. Wegen fehlender Energie geriet die Station ins Trudeln. Für die Kosmonauten habe aber keine Gefahr bestanden, meldete das Kontrollzentrum.
Die Besatzung der russischen Raumstation Mir hat in der Nacht einen Fehler im Zentralcomputer behoben. Der 6 Wochen alte Austauschcomputer war am Freitag erneut ausgefallen. Die Folge, die Mir driftete aus der Flugbahn und bekam zu wenig Energie. Die Bodenkontrolle erwartet, dass sich die Situation an Bord der Mir im Laufe des Tages wieder entspannt.
The crew of the Russian space station Mir found themselves playing a familiar role, that of repairmen. CNN's Betsy Aaron reports from Moscow.
Some things never change. With the new year just days old, Mir's computer broke down, but is back now. All business as usual, assure the Russians. With Mir approaching its 12th birthday, nothing on board can be taken for granted. New Year cheer from space soon turned into a work day and night. The crew of 2 cosmonauts and 1 astronaut once again becoming fix-it repairmen. Computer malfunctions are nothing new, 7 last year. But last November, Mir received a reconditioned computer and tons of spare parts to be able to handle just this kind of problem. It was the reconditioned computer which malfunctioned. One of the main computer blocks had to be replaced. With the computer down, the station lost its orientation towards the sun. The men on board immediately switched off power to 3 of the modules. Standard operating procedure. Power is now back, the gyroscopes are realigned. The men on board can now get back to whatever passes for normal work on Mir. There's a spacewalk scheduled for next week, January 8th and 9th. That, along with the non-scheduled but occasional breakdowns, should keep them very busy. Betsy Aaron, CNN, Moscow.
The Lunar Prospector is due to lift off in January. And the most valuable commodity scientists hope to find is something a lot of people take for granted. Just 4.5 feet tall, this 660-pound drum-shaped Lunar Prospector is scheduled to head to the moon January 5th from Cape Canaveral.
About 3 hours into the mission, we will begin to deploy the scientific instruments.
The 5 instruments attached to 8-foot arms will be prospecting for minerals like iron, aluminum, uranium, and calcium. This instrument, called the neutron spectrometer, will look for the hydrogen in water. Previous missions have spotted evidence of hydrogen in the polar regions of the moon, suggesting traces of water.
If, as I do believe, we will have man back on the moon in the not too distant future and build a base, we have to learn to live off the land. And so the data that Lunar Prospector will provide in terms of compositional data from this experiment will tell us where we can get the resources necessary to proceed along those lines.
If there is water on the moon could serve as a stopover, a refueling station for future manned explorations of the solar system.
And I think a lot of people have the idea that perhaps we know all there is to know about the moon. But the reality is we've only just scratched the surface.
The Lunar Prospector won't land on the moon. Traveling pole to pole, it will orbit 63 miles above the moon's surface for a year and will take about 2 hours to make an orbit.
Prospector does not have a computer. This is a ground-controlled spacecraft. There's only about 60 commands that I need to run Lunar Prospector.
Instruments will also look for signs of gases spewing from the interior of the moon and measure its magnetic field. Scientists say they will also look for similarities between the Earth and the moon. They hope to prove or disprove the theory that a giant asteroid slammed into Earth 4.5 billion years ago. The collision shot debris into space that clumped together to form the moon.
By mapping the surface of the moon, we will understand something about the bulk composition of the moon, and that will allow us to compare it to the bulk composition of the Earth.
NASA boasts that this $63 million year-long mission is cheap at the price, compared to its first lunar mission 30 years ago that cost $260 million.
After more than 25 years, the U.S. space agency NASA is gearing up to go back to the moon. Monday, NASA is set to launch an unmanned probe called Lunar Prospector, which will orbit the moon for at least a year. At a total cost of $63 million, the mission is one of NASA's more economical projects. CNN's Joy Chan has our report.
We've walked on it, driven on it, even played golf on it. So why send a satellite back to the moon? Well, for one thing, we don't know all the answers about the moon's history. For instance, whether it once was a piece of the Earth, knocked away by a meteor impact. And then there's always money. As it orbits, Prospector will look for minerals that may be worth mining. Iron, aluminum, silicon, titanium, and uranium. Prospector may tell us how much there is and where it's hiding. Prospector also will inspect the permanently shadowed craters at the moon's south pole, where ice from ancient comets may be trapped. If the ice can be melted, it could provide a small lake's worth of water for a human moon base. Or the H2O could be turned into hydrogen and oxygen for rocket fuel. With the moon's low gravity, it may be cheaper to launch interplanetary missions from there. Joey Chen, CNN, reporting.
Wochen gab es ein fast unbemerktes Jubiläum der Weltraumfahrt. 25 Jahre zuvor war die letzte Apollo-Mission der Amerikaner zu Ende gegangen. Seitdem haben die Raumfahrer und Raumfahrtnationen unseren Erdtrabanten links liegen gelassen. Aber die Tatsache, dass nichts Spektakuläres zu vermelden war, heißt nicht, dass nichts passiert ist. Eine Menge Mondgestein ist analysiert, Zehntausende Fotos und Messergebnisse ausgewertet worden. Und jetzt scheint es einen Neubeginn zu geben. Die Amerikaner schicken eine unbemannte Sonde zum Mond und auch die Japaner sind aktiv. Und zu dem Thema begrüße ich Harald Zimmer, unseren Spezialisten in Sachen Weltraum und Weltraumforschung, Weltraumfahrt. Guten Morgen.
Guten Morgen.
Schön, dass Sie da sind. Sagen Sie, Sie haben gerade ein Buch veröffentlicht, wollen wir mal kurz zeigen, und zwar das NASA-Protokoll Erfolge und Niederlagen. Die Mondlandungen gehörten ja zu den tatsächlich erfolgreichen Kapiteln. Warum ist es denn seit Apollo 17, dieser letzten Mission, so ruhig geworden um den Mond?
Ja, man hatte ja eine große Menge an Daten, wie Sie sagten, auch schon sehr viel Mondgestein, 380 Kilogramm von 6 verschiedenen Landeplätzen. Und eigentlich war der Mond für die Öffentlichkeit eine Enttäuschung, eine öde, tote Welt. Alles, was man zum Leben brauchte, musste man mitnehmen. Aber in der Zwischenzeit haben wir gelernt, dass der Mond nicht uninteressant ist. Der Mond ist ein riesiges Rohstofflager, das wir vielleicht später einmal nutzen müssen.
Was für Rohstoffe?
Zum Beispiel metallische Rohstoffe wie Titan und Ähnliches. Das liegt gewissermaßen auf der Oberfläche herum und kann dort verarbeitet werden. Zum anderen aber gab es also 1994 eine etwas merkwürdige Entdeckung vielleicht in Anführungsstrichen. Möglicherweise existierte in einem großen Krater am Mond Südpol Eis unter der Mondoberfläche. Eis bedeutet Wasser und Wasser ist der wichtigste Stoff, den Menschen brauchen, um auf dem Mond zu leben, zu arbeiten und möglicherweise Treibstoffe für Raketen herzustellen.
War eigentlich der Wettlauf um die Monderforschung, also Ende der 60er Jahre, Anfang der 70er, eigentlich wirklich nur ein reiner Prestigekampf zwischen Amerikanern und Sowjets um die Vorherrschaft im All, ohne wirklich ernsthaften wissenschaftlichen Hintergrund?
Das glaube ich nicht. Zunächst natürlich war das die Triebfeder. Die hat das Geld locker gemacht. Die hat also dafür gesorgt, dass man wirklich aus dem Vollen schöpfen konnte. Aber die Wissenschaft stand doch durchaus im Vordergrund. Bloß jetzt, nach 25 Jahren, wissen wir, dass wir den Mond für einen Bruchteil der Summen erforschen können. Die Sonde, die zum Beispiel am Montag starten wird, ist eine Billigsonde, die etwa 40 Millionen Dollar gekostet hat. Es ist
billig.
Ja, billig im Vergleich zu den Milliardenbeträgen, die die bemannte Mondforschung aufzuwenden hatte. Es ist auch eine gemeinsame Unternehmung zwischen NASA und Industrie. Die Rakete kommt zum Beispiel von einem großen Industrieunternehmen. So wird das sich überhaupt in Zukunft abspielen, dass sich die Industrie mehr in die Erforschung, in die Nutzung des Mondes einklinken wird. Denn für die Industrie wird es dort irgendwann mal etwas zu holen geben.
Sie sagen gerade zu holen geben. Ich meine, wir sehen ja alle eine Menge Science-Fiction-Filme, wo eine Menge passiert. Wie gut oder wie schlecht sind denn die Bedingungen, dass vielleicht mal Menschen da leben könnten, Raumstationen auf dem Mond? Kann man sich sowas vorstellen oder ist es für uns noch zu weit weg?
Nein, das ist durchaus vorstellbar. Man kann ja den Mond ein wenig mit der Antarktis vergleichen, die zuerst von einzelnen Pionieren untersucht wurde und nach Jahrzehnten entstanden dort Stationen der einzelnen Nationen. Die Japaner haben beispielsweise ein sehr anspruchsvolles Programm und wollen im Laufe der Jahre Schritt für Schritt kleine Roboter absetzen, Mini-Fabriken, alles für bescheidenes Geld. Und ich glaube, am Ende wird durchaus vielleicht in 10, 15 Jahren ja, Menschen auf dem Mond sein. Und ich fürchte beinahe, dass die Touristen die Ersten sein werden, die regelmäßig den Mond besuchen.
Werden Sie auch hinfahren?
Ach ja, doch, der Mond ist noch ein erstrebenswertes Reiseziel.
Lassen Sie uns mal kurz über den Mars reden. Der ist ja in den letzten 10 Jahren in den Mittelpunkt des Interesses gerückt. Könnten Sie sich vorstellen, dass ähnlich wie zum Mond irgendwann mal bemannte Flüge zum Mars passieren werden?
Ach ja, ich glaube das schon. Auch da sind ja die Vorbereitungen für eine wirklich intensive Erkundung im Gange. Und es wird also von den Ergebnissen der nächsten 2-3 Jahre abhängen, wie schnell die bemannte Mars-Mission kommt. Dass sie kommt, dass wir beide sie erleben, vielleicht auch noch hier darüber sprechen, das steht schon fest. Aber ob es das Jahr 2010 oder 2016 sein wird, das steht noch in den Sternen.
Werden wir Westeuropäer bei der bemannten Raumfahrt in Zukunft, auch wenn es irgendwo zu landen gilt, eine Rolle spielen?
Ja, das ist natürlich die große Frage. Wir halten uns ja mit dem Geld sehr zurück, sind sehr zugeknüpft. Die Europäer wollten jetzt auch auf den Marszug aufspringen, ihre eigene Mars-Mission Mars Express starten. Aber auch da ist natürlich die Frage, wird das Geld dafür locker gemacht? Wir rechnen das immer schnell in Arbeitsplätze um, in Effizienz. Na, wir werden sehen, was die Europäer im neuen Jahr zustande kriegen. Einer meiner Wünsche ist, dass sie also wirklich dort mitmachen.
Okay, vielen Dank. Harro Zimmer war das, unser Weltraumexperte. Wir wollen noch mal kurz ein neues Buch erwähnen, die NASA-Protokolle, das NASA-Protokoll, Erfolge und Niederlagen, hier bei uns im ZDF-Morgenmagazin. Harro Zimmer, unser Experte. Ich danke Ihnen vielmals. Es kam ein gutes 98 und hoffentlich gehen Ihre Wünsche alle in Erfüllung. Ja? Tschüss.
Meteorologists predict strong winds, including some gusts near hurricane force across Britain and northern France. The weekend weather already is being blamed for a number of deaths in France and Spain's Canary Islands, and thousands have been left without power. Here's a look at the fury of that storm. Do take care if you're in that area. We'll have more world news right after this.
Arthur C. Clarke was already one of the century's most important dreamers and writers before 2001: A Space Odyssey, but the landmark 1968 film secured his place among the legends of science fiction.
Just what do you think you're doing, Dave?
In the movie 2001, the willful, wayward computer HAL 9000 came to symbolize all of technology's promises and perils. And the impenetrable monolith that stood at the center of the story was a silent reminder of all the mysteries still beyond our grasp. The famously reclusive Clarke has lived in Sri Lanka since 1956. He rarely sits for interviews and dislikes the limelight. But contemporaries, like sci-fi author Ray Bradbury, say Clarke has done much to inspire human imagination over the past half-century.
Arthur Clarke has been part of that whole technological scheme, which is mankind in the 20th century. There's nothing we do that doesn't have to do with technology, and that's science fiction. You have to dream a thing first, and you blueprint it, then you build it, and then you move on to the next blueprint.
Clarke was among the first to dream of a global satellite communications network and helped invent the technology that made it possible. His credentials as a mathematician and physicist give weight to his fiction, and his experience as an amateur astronomer and rocket builder lend credence to his many stories, such as 2001, that feature interplanetary travel. After a lifetime of scientific and literary accomplishments, Clarke's knighthood comes just a couple of weeks after his 80th birthday.
He's an all-around good human being, and he's a superb scientist. So when you have that combination, it's only correct and right that this late in time, he should be knighted.
Rick Lockridge reporting for CNN.
Mal seit 25 Jahren läuft wieder der Countdown für einen Flug zum Mond.
Die Raumsonde Lunar Prospector soll in der kommenden Nacht starten und schon Ende der Woche den Mond erreichen. Von einer Umlaufbahn aus soll sie dort ein Jahr lang die Oberfläche beobachten. Die Sonde ist mit Spezialapparaten ausgestattet, die vor allem Wasservorkommen aufspüren können.
The unmanned Lunar Prospector aircraft is scheduled to lift off Monday night from the U.S. Space Agency's base at Cape Canaveral, Florida. CNN's John Zarella has more on the mission's objectives.
Every night, somewhere on Earth, moonlight shines through bedroom windows. 250,000 miles away, the moon is by far our closest and most familiar neighbor in space.
I was strolling on the moon one day.
But it has been more than 25 years since the last astronauts visited there. In total, the Apollo missions returned 842 pounds of moon samples. Since then, there has been a lapse in lunar interest.
Many people think that the moon has already been well studied, but in fact, Apollo looked at only a fairly narrow band around the equator of the moon. More than 80% of the moon was not studied by Apollo.
Much about the moon remains a mystery scientists believe this spacecraft will solve. Called Lunar Prospector, it is set for launch on a 5-day journey to the moon. Once it arrives, Prospector, from a 62-mile orbit, will begin a year-long study, analyzing the lunar gravity, magnetic fields, and surface elements.
The thing that makes Prospector really special is basically its simplicity. It has no computer on board, for example. This cuts the cost and keeps it more reliable.
One instrument has the capability to locate as little as a single cup of water. Some scientists believe water ice is encased in the moon's polar regions.
First of all, it's going to answer the question of, is there water ice on the moon?
If it's there, future moon bases would be more feasible. The water used for life support and as a source of oxygen and hydrogen to make rocket fuel. There are also new computer simulations indicating the moon formed in about a year from debris blown into space after a rogue planet collided with Earth 4.5 billion years ago. Scientists hope the Lunar Prospector proves or disproves that theory once and for all. John Zarella, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
And the Lunar Prospector is scheduled to launch a little more than 4.5 hours from now. CNN will bring you live coverage of the launch.
Der Prospector ist einen Tag verschoben worden. Grund seien technische Probleme, hieß es in Cape Canaveral. Ursprünglich sollte die Trägerrakete vom Typ Athena mit der Sonde heute gegen 2:30 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit starten. Der Liftoff soll nun in der kommenden Nacht stattfinden. Sollte auch der zweite Termin nicht eingehalten werden, kann die Sonde erst Anfang Februar starten. Lunar Prospector soll auf dem Mond nach Wasser suchen. Die Sonde wird allerdings nicht landen, sondern den Mond aus einer Umlaufbahn in 100 Kilometern Höhe erkunden.
The launch of a rocket carrying the unmanned Lunar Prospector spacecraft was postponed Monday because of last-minute radar problems. It has been rescheduled for Tuesday night. The spacecraft is to orbit the moon for about a year, studying the composition of the lunar surface. It is also expected to test a long-held theory that ice may exist at the lunar poles.
If NASA fails to launch the spacecraft on Tuesday, it will have to wait until February to try again when the moon is again in proper alignment.
The U.S. Space Agency, NASA, is seconds away from the launch of its first mission to the moon in 25 years. This is the picture from Cape Canaveral in Florida. 25 hours ago, the launch was halted due to a faulty radar dish. Now, the unmanned Lunar Prospector is ready to go. Let's listen in.
ABC-1 verified. Check 3. Copy 3. Oswald Gimbal, check 4. Copy 4.
T-minus 15 seconds and counting. Standing by for terminal count. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And liftoff of the Athena 2 rocket and the Lunar Prospector spacecraft on a voyage to rediscover the moon.
ATS activated.
Pitch program is now beginning. T plus 20 seconds.
goes. The Lunar Prospector weighs around 300 kilograms, and it's worth about $63 million. Just to remind you, the last time man went to the moon was in December 1972 with the Apollo 17 mission. But of course, everyone remembers Neil Armstrong's great leap for mankind in 1969. This is not a manned mission. It is a mission of science. The idea is that they will try to map the moon's surface and in the process find out if there's any ice or any sign of water there.
Plus 1 minute.
The probe will also analyze the moon's surface content and its gravitational and magnetic fields.
1 minute, 28 seconds.
The picture you're looking at shows the Lunar Prospector hitching a ride to space on the back of a Lockheed Martin Athena 2 rocket. And everything seems to be going smoothly.
Maximum dynamic pressure.
We are now going through max Q, going through the sound barrier, period of dynamic pressure. There is our separation, first stage separation. Altitude 11.1 miles, 19 miles downrange. Second stage now burning.
Yes.
Second stage is reported to be burning normally. Everything looks good.
Well, mission control seems happy. Everything looks good. The second stage, the first stage is, of course, the rocket. The force of that rocket needed to propel the Lunar Prospector into or out of the Earth's surface orbit. Well, we'll leave it there. The Lunar Prospector is on its way to the moon. Voyage to rediscover the moon, as Mission Control put it. That's it for now. We can now return to Larry King Live.
This has been a CNN Live event.
1-0, and liftoff of the Athena 2 rocket and the Lunar Prospector spacecraft on a voyage to rediscover.
And after a quarter of a century and a 24-hour delay, America's space agency is heading back to the moon.
Unbemannte amerikanische Mondsonde Lunar Prospector heute früh erfolgreich in Cape Canaveral gestartet. Die Sonde wird den Mond ein Jahr lang in einer Höhe von 100 Kilometern umkreisen und soll herausfinden, ob es auf dem Erdtrabanten Wasser gibt oder gegeben hat. Sie ist mit 3 Spektrometern ausgestattet, um Gase zu messen, die aus dem Inneren des Mondes nach außen dringen. Dies ist die erste Mondmission der NASA seit 25 Jahren.
Erfolgreicher Start zum Mond. Mit eintägiger Verspätung ist Lunar Prospector nun unterwegs zum Erdtrabanten. Um 3:28 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hob die Athena 2 Trägerrakete mit der Sonde an Bord vom amerikanischen Weltraumzentrum Cape Canaveral aus ab. Gestern früh war der Countdown wegen technischer Probleme um 24 Stunden verschoben worden. In 5 Tagen wird Lunar Prospector den Mond erreichen. Ein Jahr lang soll ihn die Sonde umkreisen und die chemische Zusammensetzung seiner Oberfläche analysieren. 25 Jahre nach Abschluss des Apollo-Programms setzt die NASA nun ihre Monderforschung fort.
America's Lunar Prospector is on its way.
There is our separation, first stage separation. Altitude 11.1.
Der Lunar Prospector ist in der Nacht vom Weltraumbahnhof Cape Canaveral in Florida gestartet. Um genau 3:28 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit hob die Rakete mit der unbemannten Sonde zu ihrer 18-monatigen Mondmission ab. Es ist die erste Mondmission der USA seit 25 Jahren. Von einer Umlaufbahn 100 Kilometer über dem Mond soll Lunar Prospector mit Spezialgeräten mögliche Wasser- und Eisvorkommen auf dem Mond aufspüren. Wasserreserven auf dem Mond würden es in der Zukunft erlauben, dort eine Basis einzurichten, von der aus Expeditionen ins Weltall gestartet werden könnten. Weil das Radarsystem nicht funktioniert hatte, war der Start der Lunar Prospector bereits zweimal verschoben worden.
In Florida, less than 5 hours ago, the unmanned Lunar Prospector will orbit the moon and probe its surfaces for possible sources of water that could sustain a human colony. The satellite is scheduled to fall into lunar orbit and begin its mission in about a week from now.
Lunar Prospector ist auf dem Weg zum Mond. Gegen 3:30 heute Morgen hob die Trägerrakete ab. Die Sonde soll ein Jahr lang die Oberfläche des Mondes vermessen. An Bord hat sie die Urne mit einem Teil der Asche des Astronomen Gene Shoemaker. Er hatte den Kometen Shoemaker-Levy 9 Ring mitentdeckt, der 1993 auf dem Jupiter einschlug. Shoemaker wollte eigentlich Astronaut werden, konnte dies aber wegen seiner Gesundheit nicht.
The universe arrived with a Big Bang. Just how might it depart? Astronomers meeting in Washington are tackling that end-all question. Rick Lockridge reports.
The universe may have started with a Big Bang, but it will not end with a Big Crunch. So say several groups of astronomers, who claim their latest findings leave little room for doubt.
The universe is lightweight, that there isn't enough matter in the universe to stop its expansion.
The universe will expand forever, and that we live in a universe that will never end.
How can they be so sure? Netta Bacall counted clusters of galaxies. In a heavy universe bound for recollapse, she reasoned, the clusters would be gone by now. But there are clusters everywhere, and too much empty space in between.
That we have only about 20% or so of the mass that is needed to exist in the universe if the mass was going to stop the expansion.
Other scientists are measuring light from stars that exploded billions of years ago. Their light is just reaching Earth now. By comparing these so-called distant supernovae with closer supernovae, they too are declaring the universe forever outward bound.
We find that it's slowing, but not enough to ever quite come to a halt and turn around and collapse again.
Astronomers are also abuzz over the latest images of Beta Pictoris, a young nearby star system with an unusual bulging disk of dust and gas. Some say a planet lurks inside that disk, causing the bulge with its gravity.
I believe that the observations are consistent with it being a planet, and it's inconsistent with it being interpreted in any other way.
But hold on there, others aren't so sure.
I'm from Missouri, and so we have a lot of doubt.
Breweiler says a passing star or a dim companion star called a brown dwarf could be causing the bulge. But Heap and NASA are so sure it's a planet, they offered to bet $100 to your $5 that it is.
Would you bet your $5 against their 100?
Yes, I would.
You have that much uncertainty, at least $5 worth.
Yes.
Would you bet your own $100?
Sure.
You're that certain?
Yes. I mean, to use the cliche, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck.
So it must be a planet.
That bet could be settled within a lifetime. Scientists say instruments could be deployed within the next 20 years that would not only be able to pinpoint distant planets, but also determine whether they have atmospheres capable of sustaining life. In Washington, Rick Lockridge reporting for CNN.
Bernie, we've just learned that the cosmonauts opened the hatch about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. They went outside a little bit ahead of schedule right now. 240 miles above the Earth, two cosmonauts and astronaut Dave Wolf beginning what could be an exciting adventure. This is the live picture from Russian Mission Control. And if you look at all the empty chairs there, Bernie, you can see that the mission controllers are not too concerned about things. Mir Space Station is out of touch with Mission Control at this moment, and Victor Blagoff, the chief controller, and others probably out grabbing a bite of food. It's the middle of the night where they are. At any rate, they've been revising the plans for this spacewalk all day long. Here's what's going to happen over the next 6 hours. Mir Commander Anatoly Solovyev and Flight Engineer Pavel Vinogradov have gone to the airlock on Mir. This is the Kavant 2 module. The airlock hatch is located right there. They popped the hatch open, and they have already gone outside. Have a couple of jobs to do on this particularly grueling spacewalk, and in fact, the two cosmonauts have been asleep most of the day getting ready for it. They've got a video camera, which will take close-up pictures of the airlock, and they'll try to determine precisely why the airlock has been leaking for the past month. They have some repair parts for the rubber-like airlock seal and some additional clamps to hold the door in place. Earlier efforts to seal the airlock with extra clamps failed, and managers hope they can stop the station's precious air supply from leaking into space by adding some more clamps to the ones they've already used. There's a spare seal for the airlock, but these cosmonauts who are up in space now haven't been trained on its installation, which is why it won't be used tonight. After they clean the hatch seal and take some pictures of it, they'll journey out to the side of the space station to retrieve this box. It was left in space last April by astronaut Jerry Lininger. You see him there on his spacewalk. After the monitor box is brought back inside, the cosmonauts will try to seal the airlock, add those extra clamps to the inside, and then repressurize this part of Mir. They will then take off their spacesuits and resume normal operations for a few days. They're going to watch the air pressure inside to see if the new clamps have solved that leakage problem. If not, the next crew of cosmonauts, which gets into space in a few months, will do another spacewalk and actually install the new seal. While the cosmonauts are outside, astronaut Dave Wolf will be inside Mir, supervising, helping in any way he can. He hopes to be able to take pictures of the walk and link those pictures to us here on Earth as Mir flies over Russian ground stations. Wolf gets his chance to conduct his own spacewalk next Wednesday. He's going to go outside with Commander Solovyev and carry a portable spectrometer built by NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. This gizmo will be used to examine the entire skin surface of Mir to find the results of 12 years in space. The purpose of the test will be to tell NASA managers what materials do and do not work to maintain structural integrity on a space station. They're going to use this in building the new International Station. Dave Wolf says he really wants to do this.
I certainly hope to. I certainly feel well prepared to. We have a number of scientific instruments, American instruments on the outside of the station which need to be retrieved, along with taking some measurements on the behavior of the surfaces of the station, how they've reacted to this long duration in space to help us design better surfaces for the International Space Station that we're starting to build next year.
Bernie, we're going to watch the spacewalk together during the evening, and I'll let you know how it's going, as David Wolf occasionally may talk to us in English and almost certainly will feed down some pictures as the two cosmonauts are doing their work outside. Mir Space Station, as you know, Bernie, has been through a very rough last 8 months.
John Holloman with some very interesting and compelling information. Thanks a lot.
Bauten sie ein Forschungsgerät ab und brachten es mit einem Teleskoparm in die Ausstiegsluke. Der Aufenthalt im All dauerte nur 3 statt wie geplant 6 Stunden. Der Amerikaner David Wolf blieb währenddessen im Basisblock und filmte seine Kollegen mit einer Videokamera bei der Arbeit.
Wir haben heute Morgen gut 3 Stunden außerhalb der russischen Weltraumstation Mir im All gearbeitet. Sie holten ein amerikanisches Forschungsgerät zurück, das außenbords installiert war, und inspizierten eine undichte Ausstiegsluke. Sie soll im nächsten Monat repariert werden. Pannen gab es nicht. Das 3. Besatzungsmitglied, ein Amerikaner, war während des Einsatzes in der Station geblieben. Es war der 6. sogenannte Weltraumspaziergang der Mir-Besatzung in 4,5 Monaten.
Nach knapp 4 Stunden Arbeit sind die beiden russischen Besatzungsmitglieder der beschädigten Mir wieder wohlbehalten in die Raumstation zurückgekehrt. Außenbords hatten sie eine undichte Ausstiegsluke untersucht und ein Forschungsgerät abmontiert. Ihr amerikanischer Kollege machte unterdessen Videoaufnahmen von der Arbeit im All. Es war der bereits 6. riskante Außeneinsatz für die Besatzung der pannengeplagten Mir in den vergangenen 4,5 Monaten.
Anatoly Solovyev and Pavel Vinogradov placed a clamp on a leaky hatch used for spacewalks and retrieved a monitor designed to test equipment for the International Space Station. U.S. astronaut David Wolf is also expected to take a walk in space in the coming days.
I certainly hope to. I certainly feel well prepared to. We have a number of scientific instruments, American instruments on the outside of the station which need to be retrieved, along with taking some measurements on the behavior of the surfaces of the station, how they've reacted to this long duration in space to help us design better surfaces for the International Space Station that we're starting to build next year.
And the crew should know in a day or two if the leak was successfully sealed.
Während eines 4-stündigen Aufenthaltes im All fanden die beiden russischen Kosmonauten eine undichte Ausstiegsluke. Einer von insgesamt 10 Verschlussriegeln ist beschädigt. Nach Ansicht der Flugleitzentrale kann die Besatzung ihn bei einem weiteren Ausstieg reparieren. Material dafür soll mit der US-Raumfähre Endeavour zu Mir gebracht werden. Der Start ist für den 22. Januar vorgesehen.
Die beiden russischen Kosmonauten Solovjev und Vinogradov haben die Raumstation Mir 4 Stunden lang für Reparaturarbeiten verlassen. Sie fanden eine seit Monaten undichte Stelle an einer Ausstiegsluke und verschlossen sie. Außerdem bauten die beiden ein amerikanisches Forschungsgerät ab und brachten es mit einem Teleskoparm in die Station. Es war bereits der 6. Weltraumspaziergang der Mir-Besatzung in den letzten 4,5 Monaten.
Still on the subject of space, there are new clues to help understand how our universe began. New data from a spacecraft called COBE suggests there is much more to the universe than meets the eye. Rick Lockridge explains.
This picture of our universe is the result of 23 years of work and some 2 billion measurements, all for a fuzzy orange oval. But the orange fuzz is important. It is an infrared image of dust, interstellar dust that glows from all the stars that have ever warmed it. Astronomers think of the glowing dust as a fossil record of stars dead and gone.
Well, it's radiation that's left over from a long time ago. That's what fossils typically mean to us.
An infrared telescope aboard the COBE Cosmic Background Explorer scanned the suburbs of the universe 7 years ago, but it took scientists from then until now to filter out everything but the faraway dust they were looking for. They discovered the dust is glowing too brightly to be lit by just the 50 billion galaxies we can see. So where does the rest of the light come from? David Spergel says it may come from distant, unseen galaxies.
There are another 100 billion galaxies that are almost all completely dust enshrouded. Most of the star formation in the universe took place in dusty regions, and that probably 2/3 of the energy in the universe from stars was radiated from dusty regions.
If accurate, such an estimate would mean that our universe is 2/3 starrier than we thought it was. That information will be invaluable to scientists studying the Big Bang by giving them a handle on the total amount of energy in the observable universe. If they know that amount, they can calculate more precisely how our universe began, how the stars and galaxies were born. And so the hard-wrought image of orange fuzz moves us closer to answering the big three questions.
Where are we? Where did we come from? And how's it all going to end up?
But instruments aboard the Hubble Space Telescope and the yet-to-be-launched Next Generation Space Telescope will give scientists a closer look at whatever's causing that glowing space dust, the embers in the heart of the universe. Rick Lockridge for CNN, Washington.
Astronomical Society met this week in Washington. Among the findings, an eerie glow stretching through the whole universe that could help scientists understand more about the birth of stars and planets. The glow isn't visible to the naked eye. It's infrared radiation produced by dust warmed by all the stars that have ever existed. It provides information on a lot of stars that scientists didn't even know about. And it tells scientists how much energy has been released by all the stars in the universe, which could help explain how stars and galaxies developed after the Big Bang. The glow was discovered by NASA's Cosmic Background Explorer spacecraft known as COBE. Other highlights of the conference included a ferocious black hole that scientists call Old Faithful. Rick Lockridge has more.
This new animation shows a hungry black hole 40,000 light-years away cannibalizing its companion star. Nothing unusual about that. Such behavior has been seen before. But then this black hole suddenly throws off 100 trillion tons of the matter it has just sucked in. And it repeats this binge-purge cycle over and over again. In fact, scientists have started calling it Old Faithful.
Because this thing does, when it's in the mood to create jets, it does so fairly regularly, about every 30 minutes or so.
Scientists say the disk of material surrounding the black hole, called an accretion disk, forms normally. But then, as it spins faster and grows hotter, it gets more unstable. And then, boom, an amount of material as massive as Mount Everest is ejected at 92% of the speed of light.
It's incredibly violent. We're talking about something that is trillions of times the average or the annual energy output of the entire United States of America.
In the movie Contact and elsewhere, black holes have been portrayed as gentle, benign, stable enough even to be used as conveyances. But this particular black hole is a reminder that there are still some pretty rough neighborhoods in the galaxy, and you wouldn't want to be here when the clock hits 1/2 Also at center stage here today, the suspected supermassive black hole at the center of our own galaxy. Now, it cannot be seen by telescopes, but scientists have figured out another way to demonstrate that it is there.
And we were able to measure the motions and the spectra of stars very close into the center.
And it turns out those stars, right near the galactic center, are moving as fast as 600 kilometers a second. Researchers say those stars would only move that fast if they were orbiting an object as massive as 2.5 million suns. Astronomers are also abuzz over the latest images of Beta Pictoris, a young nearby star system with an unusual bulging disk of dust and gas. Some say a planet lurks inside that disk, causing the bulge with its gravity.
I believe that the observations are consistent with it being a planet, and it's inconsistent with it being interpreted in any other way.
But other researchers say a passing star, or dim companion star, could be responsible for the bulging disk. More research is planned. It began with a bang, and it will indeed end with a whimper, As many astronomers now believe, our observable universe is doomed to expand forever until the last stars flicker and die.
So it will be a dark, cold, and mostly empty space universe with galaxies very far apart.
How can scientists be so sure? Netta Bacall counted clusters of galaxies. In a heavy universe bound for recollapse, she reasoned, the clusters would be gone by now, but there are clusters everywhere and too much empty space in between.
That we have only about 20% or so of the mass that is needed to exist in the universe if the mass was going to stop the expansion.
Other scientists are measuring light from stars that exploded billions of years ago. Their light is just reaching Earth now. By comparing these so-called distant supernovae with closer supernovae, they too are declaring the universe forever outward bound. Rick Lockridge for CNN, Washington.
An important note to our faithful viewers. Starting next week, our air times will change. Here are some of the new times. We'll show these again in a few minutes. Coming up later in this show, shooting the moon. A small, cheap spacecraft could find some surprises on our moon. For the first time in 25 years, NASA is headed to the moon. A compact, low-cost spacecraft is starting a year-long mission that could answer some important questions, including whether people could live on the moon. John Zarella reports.
The moon beckoned from above. After a quarter century, an old friend was about to pay a return visit.
2, 1, 0, and liftoff of the Athena.
The launch of the Athena rocket carrying Lunar Prospector marks the first time NASA has gone back to the moon to conduct lunar science since the end of the Apollo program.
Most people think with the moon, hey, we've been there and done that. We brought back a half a ton of rocks. Don't we know everything there is to know? And we really don't.
At a price tag of $63 million, Prospector is, as space vehicles go, bargain basement, but is expected to provide a wealth of information. The primary goal is to search for water ice that some scientists believe is encased in the lunar South Pole. That discovery would make future moon bases more feasible.
If you want to go and do it inexpensively, you need to live off the land. And with water ice, you can make oxygen to drink, you can make oxygen to breathe, you can make water to drink, and you can make rocket fuel.
Scientists say whether there's an abundance of water ice or not, humans will one day colonize the moon. But that probably won't happen for another 100 years. Cost has a lot to do with it. A permanent lunar base could cost hundreds of billions of dollars. And perhaps surprisingly, less is known about the moon than one might think. 80% of the lunar surface has never been fully explored. John Zarella, CNN, at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
If you think it was hot last year, you're right. Government weather researchers say 1997 was the hottest year ever recorded. Miles O'Brien tells us what's behind this streak and what it may mean for the future.
Look out your window. The global heat wave scientists are predicting may already be here. And while the annual changes are subtle, fractions of degrees Fahrenheit, for most of us, they are degrees of difficulty. First off, if you think it's raining more heavily these days, you are correct. In the U.S., downpours are more common, precisely what scientists say happens when the atmosphere heats up. Meanwhile, scarcity of rain is a growing problem in other parts of the world. For some, the face of climate change could be a cracked, dry moonscape. And of course, it is no day at the beach along the coastlines. As huge glaciers melt, sea level is rising slightly, but beaches are washing away. In the Northern Hemisphere, spring is coming a little earlier, fall a little later. That trend may one day offer a silver lining for the nation's breadbasket, a longer growing season. But it also may send New England's glorious autumn into Canada. And some pesky problems also appear to be heading north. Fire ants, the mean-tempered, brutal-biting scourge of the southeast, have been found as far north as Philadelphia. And Formosan termites, which have feasted on studs and joists in New Orleans for years, may sample northern homes before long. When it comes to the effects, there really is no debate. The planet is indeed getting hotter. The question of cause is a stickier wicket, however. While the vast majority of scientists are virtually certain we humans are cooking our own geese, When the debate moves into the realm of economics and politics, things seem a lot less clear-cut. Miles O'Brien, CNN, Atlanta.
Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Q&A. It could happen in the next few minutes. The US astronaut and Russian cosmonaut are preparing to take a walk together in zero gravity. The spacewalk outside the Russian space station Mir will be a troubleshooting expedition. Mir is now 12 years old and has been in and out of trouble for the past year. So what's in store for Mir in the future? And what has it meant for the future of space exploration? We've got two guests with us today to answer those questions and more. Joining me here in the studio in Atlanta is our resident space expert, John Holloman. And with us from Tallahassee in Florida is former US astronaut Norm Thagard. He spent more than 100 days back on Mir back in 1995. Well, our viewers are already eager to ask you both all sorts of questions, but John is going to start off with a little preview of what's happening there, John.
Well, I just got off the phone with Mission Control in Moscow, Riz, and I've got a picture to illustrate what's happening. The astronaut and the cosmonauts are right now at the final hatch that they have to open to go outside. This picture of Mir floating in space, of course. That hatch is located on this picture. Well, you can't see it on this picture, but the hatch is a big doorway, unlike any other hatch in any other space vehicle that's ever been created. The hatch is a doorway that opens out into space. There's Dave Wolf in an interview recorded a little bit earlier when he was talking about what was going on. And the hatch has 10 latches around its circumference, and 5 of these latches you open by turning a big wheel in the middle. The other, rather 5 of them, and then the other 5 you have to open by hand, manually, turning little cranks on them, and they're in the process of turning those little cranks. Probably in the next 2 or 3 minutes, the hatch will open, and they'll begin the trek outside.
So quite a procedure just getting in and out, isn't it?
Yeah, because this hatch is pretty much worn out. People at NASA say they believe there's some metal fatigue on this hatch because it's been opened and shut so many times for so many spacewalks, and it's been repressurized or pressurized and depressurized so many times. You have to do that every time you go into the airlock area to go outside.
Well, John, let's you've given us some background on tape, which we can go to as well, just so we can find out exactly what's happening there.
After a cosmonaut spacewalk, which failed to seal a leaky Mir airlock hatch, astronaut Dave Wolf will finally get to make his own trip outside in a Russian spacesuit. Wolf, who has spent the past 4 months on the Mir space station, will walk into space Wednesday night to examine the space station's skin for signs of degradation.
Since I was 9 years old and Ed White did the first spacewalk from a Gemini capsule, I've wanted to do a spacewalk. And I have a healthy respect for the issue. It must be done right. And that brings up training. We trained intensely before the mission. I continue to train on board. You see, we have this wonderful spacesuit, which is in itself a spaceship.
Wolf took a crash course in spacewalking the month before he left for Mir. He says he's making the walk with the best possible partner.
I'll be going outside, if all goes well, as planned, with the most experienced spacewalker in the universe, certainly on Earth, or in space around Earth, Anatoly, and I look forward to taking a lesson from this fine spacewalker.
NASA officials met through the week to give final approval to Wolf's participation in the walk.
Dave has had adequate training. He's fully prepared to go execute this. We're confident that he understands what this is about. He knows the suit. He's ready to perform in it.
Wolf is spending his spare time packing his equipment for his return to Earth. Shuttle Endeavour scheduled to pick him up next week. But he doesn't have any spare time at all right now, Riz. He's there in the hatch. The commander will go outside. Wolf has a little gizmo he's going to carry in his hand to look for stress on the sides of the Mir space station, which will help the designers of the new International Space Station. If there's something that's really stressed out on the skin of Mir, they don't want to put that in the new one.
Well, John, we're going to get to our viewers in just a moment because it's time for you and Norm Thagard to start tackling some tough viewer questions. That means it's time for our viewers at home to call in. You can join in the discussion in a number of ways, phone, fax, or over the internet by sending us an email. Remember, our phone number is 1-404-525-6888. John Holloman and Norm Thagard, thanks both of you for being with us. Norm, let me start with you actually there in Tallahassee. What's so special about this particular walk?
Well, for Dave Wolf, it probably because he's doing his first spacewalk in a Russian spacesuit, every spacewalk is unique. This is probably the first one in which they've gone out to look at the sorts of problems with the skin that they're doing. So I guess if there's uniqueness to it, it is that aspect, the fact that they have not done this task before.
And the fact that it's 4 hours, Norm, is that particularly unusual?
No, actually, that's fairly short. The suit is capable, the Russian suit, of up to probably about 7 hours.
All right. John, let me ask you, they're going out there looking for wear and tear on the skin there. If they do find there's some severe wear and tear, does this mean Russia turns around and says, that's it for Mir?
Probably not, because they don't expect to find severe wear and tear. This particular optical analyzer can look sort of through the skin and see into the metal behind it. At least that's the way it's been described to me. And I mean, Mir's life is probably another 1.5 years, 2 years at most. And the things that they're going to see here aren't going to tell them, nope, let's abandon ship. But it'll just give the designers on the ground of the new machine some extra help. They're going to be doing this, by the way, Riz, in the bottom 2/3 of your screen. The oldest parts of Mir are the Mir base block or core module, where Norm Taggart spent a lot of his time when he was up there, and then in the Cavant 1 module, which is below those two big wide, or actually where those two big wide solar panels at the bottom of your screen are located.
Well, I'm going to get back to Norm to answer our first email question that came in from Denmark. It says, Norm, it says, when all is said and done, what will be Mir's lasting legacy to space exploration?
One of its lasting legacies we'll get to see for the next some odd years, because much of the experience learned from Mir went into the design and ultimately the construction of the new station, which will begin assembly this year.
What do you think, John? What will be the legacy of Mir?
The fact that human beings could sustain life in space over such a long period of time. Riz, I got a note. I was down in Houston at NASA's Houston headquarters yesterday, and they pointed out the fact that Mir's going to be 13 years old next month. And you think about it, an airplane, a boat, a ship, that doesn't get to go into port and get some maintenance work done on it in dry dock over 13 years wouldn't be surviving. The fact that this is surviving and that human beings have been able to live there virtually all the time for 13 years is going to be part of the legacy for sure.
Well, let's ask Norm what he thinks of this email question. Norm from Tanzania, this question says, would it be wise for Mir to connect with the International Space Station? That's being planned, of course.
It would not be wise. The Mir and the International Station aren't designed for that, and it would, first of all, the Mir doesn't even have the capability of translation, meaning you can't move it about. The only way it reboosts its orbit, in fact, is to use the Progress or the Soyuz. So it wouldn't be wise, and it's not practical either.
Germany's on the line. Michael has a question. Go ahead, Michael.
Hello, Riz.
Hi.
This is for either one of the guests. If the space station Mir is abandoned or could no longer be used, what would happen to it? Would it be retrieved back to Earth, or would it fall back to Earth, or what would happen?
I know John's itching with that one.
I wish there were a way to do it, to bring it back to Earth, because they're going to lose a lot of scientific equipment that's on board there, just because there's no way to get it back. But Mir is going to be separated into its individual modules. The Russian plan for this, which is still being developed as of yesterday, they said they hadn't finalized exactly when they were going to do it. They'll send Progress supply ships up, hook them onto an individual section of Mir, and then disconnect that section from the central core and shoot it section by section down into the Earth's atmosphere, where it'll burn up, probably before it does any damage down here.
All right, John, well, don't go away. Norm, don't go away either. More on Mir's future and the spacewalk that's about to take place, or is maybe even taking place right now, when we return on Q&A. We encourage you to check out the Q&A webpage at cnn.com/Q&A on the World Wide Web. There you'll find a list of upcoming show topics and guests. From the webpage, you can email us if you want to, and you can even download the software to join our real-time chat room, which opens up about 15 minutes before each program. So be sure to check out that webpage at cnn.com/Q&A. Well, let's welcome back to this program on this Mir spacewalk. As the whole program is the Mir program as a whole, we're discussing that. What impact has Mir had on space exploration? and for the future of international space station projects. Our guests are shedding some light on those questions and much more. Our own space expert John Holloman's with me here in the Atlanta studio, and another space expert, former Mir astronaut Norm Thagard, is joining us from Tallahassee in Florida. And shows about space exploration always spark a high number of calls, so let's get straight back to those in just a moment. But John, let me ask you about this hatch. They could be actually heading right out of that now.
Yeah, we have a call into Mission Control in Moscow to see exactly what the deal is, and I've now got a picture of the hatch that will illustrate the problem that the astronauts and cosmonauts have had with it. There are 10 latches around the side here. There's one there, one there, one there, one there, one there, there, and there that are opened with this big wheel in the middle. And there are 10 other latches in between those primary latches which have to be operated by hand. And because the hatch has been leaking since back in November, they've used the secondary latches in addition to the primary latches to try to keep the air from escaping through this hatch. They thought they had solved the problem at the end of the last spacewalk. Turned out it was still leaking a little bit. So there's some NASA experts who've looked at these pictures, and they say it appears to them that the hatch itself is probably just worn out from many years in space. And the sad thing is that there is no spare. So it's going to, the Russians are considering the possibility of manufacturing a new hatch, putting it in the cargo bay of the shuttle, sending it up to Mir. It's far from a done deal yet, but they really would like to have that hatch so that it doesn't leak.
Just so it keeps going for a little while.
Yeah.
Let's get a caller on the line from Russia. Alexander, your question, please. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you gentlemen, about, among all this criticism during the last period of time of Russian space program, and especially this technical mismanagement and mishandling, do you gentlemen realize the enormous potential and enormous achievements in Russian space station program during those 10 years for the international space program and generally for all of us?
Well, Norm, you're actually up there. You've got the best view of it, really.
Well, sure, and I admired the Russian space program. They had done great things in space, continue to do so, and I'm happy that they're partners with us in the International Space Station effort.
John, I'm told just now from our call into the Russian Mission Control that they're still inside. They haven't actually got outside just yet. We'll obviously keep people updated on that. Let me ask you, though, how do you think the Americans feel? You know NASA well. How does NASA feel about the way that Mir has been pretty much kept going longer than they expected?
Well, the Americans are in awe of the fact that the Russians have been able to do this, and they are trying, quite frankly, Riz, to steal as much knowledge, or at least get the Russians to share as much knowledge as they can about how to do what is being done on Mir and what has been done for the past dozen years. The fact is that the Russian way of doing things is very different from the NASA way of doing things in space. Astronauts that I have talked to who won't tell me this on television because the NASA line is we are cooperating fully with the Russians, they're our best friends, and we don't want to say anything bad, is there have been some problems in the Russian space program in the way they do them, at least in the minds of NASA people who are used to doing things a totally different way. Example, let me just show you this. This is the timeline. This is a radiogram that was sent up to Mir yesterday, telling the cosmonauts what to do in their spacewalk. So they're going to be outside for 4 hours, and they got 2 pages. Now, this is the flight plan for a day or two of the next space shuttle mission, maybe 48 hours, and maybe 200 pages. I mean, this timeline is so specific that there are times for the astronauts to brush their teeth on it. I mean, it is so detailed. And that's just one example of the differences in planning to do a space journey that's going to last 10 days, as the next shuttle mission is, versus doing one that's going to last 12 years, as the current Mir program is. You don't get as much help or interference, depending on your point of view from the ground, when you deal with the Russians than when you deal with the Americans.
They're being nagged in space.
Yeah.
Let's get the Netherlands on the line. Our caller there, your question, please. Marcel, go on.
Hi, Riz. My question for one of your guests is, have any breakthroughs been achieved as a result of the research that has gone on in the Mir, especially regarding medicine or growth techniques for silicone in the electronics industry?
Norm, do you want to take that one?
Well, I don't know if we could call them breakthroughs, but we have studied things like the ability to grow creatures, if you like, birds in space, and that has implications for colonies if we ever attempt to have colonies in space. So it's suggested that we need to do a lot more research into that, not necessarily on Mir, but in Space Shuttle. We've done things with absolute application to physiology and medicine on Earth. Some of the vestibular experiments that we've done have elucidated mechanisms of the human eighth nerve, which we never would have found if we had tried to perform those experiments on Earth.
One thing, the beauty of Q&A, one thing we have is the internet, and we've got messages on our message board there. Let's check in with this question that came in. It says, you might know about this, but I was wondering, wasn't there a problem a few years ago on Mir with the same airlock hatch on Kvant what is it, 22? Kvant 2, sorry, there, go on, I couldn't read that properly. Go on, John.
Well, I've had some minor problems, and I mean, if you're dealing with something that's been in space this long, you're going to have minor problems. This leak in the hatch is something that's a more serious problem, although the Russians say it's not life-threatening at all, and it isn't, because they have a front door, which is this leaking airlock, and a back door that they can also close to keep virtually all the air inside the space station in place, but you just don't want to have a leak in your space station. That's the reason they're concerned about it now. Previous problems have been not as serious as this one, but this one, the Russians say, and the Americans now agree, is not a threat to the health and safety of the people who are living there.
All right, well, John, don't go away. Go on, Norm, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, John, and you understand, too, that there is the possibility of using the middle section of the Kvant 2 module as a secondary airlock if, in fact, you wind up not being able to close the external one. So there are always redundancy factors.
All right, we're going to take another short break. Our caller in Germany, don't go away. We'll get to you as soon as we get back. Get back to today's program. We're talking about the Mir mission, and we have two guests answering our questions. John Holloman's our Atlanta expert in space, and he's not quite in space yet, but he will be, I'm sure. And Norm Thagard's in Tallahassee, Florida. We'll get back to a call from Germany. Go ahead, Daniel.
Hi, my question is to Norm. When you were up on the Mir space station, how much of that time did your Russian colleagues spend on repair and maintenance work, and how much approximately on actual scientific research? And how might these figures look now?
My Russian colleagues spent probably the majority of their time on maintenance and repair of Mir Station, and as the cosmonaut researcher, my job was to conduct the science program. You usually wind up with those kind of divisions where some crew members are primarily devoted to the systems and the spacecraft aspect, and the other folks are devoted to the science program. So it operated the same way on Mir as it does on Shuttle.
And John, let me ask you about Dave Wolf. What's really known about him? What sort of guy is he? And is it likely he might be the last one up on Mir from NASA?
Well, there's another one scheduled to go up in about a week, Riz. Andy Thomas, who has joint American-Australian citizenship. He was born in Australia, became an American citizen, and week before last went back to Australia and found out that they changed the law so that he can have joint citizenship. Dave Wolf, the man who's on Mir right now, is the one talking on the right side of your screen. Anatoly Solovyev, the commander who's going outside with him right now, is in the middle. There again is Dave Wolf with some of his science experiments. Wolf is a medical doctor. He's an aerobatic pilot. He's been an astronaut for more than 5 years, and he's a very funny man, Riz. He's a great jokester. People in Moscow, when I was over in October, right after he went up, were telling Dave Wolf stories about what he did in his off hours. So he's a fun guy. He's also become almost poetic writer. He is sending email from the Mir space station to a bunch of us. And the last one that I got talked about some accidents that he had had. He had a plastic bag full of hot coffee, and he was trying to carry this bag sealed shut in his mouth while he was carrying a CD player in one hand and a wrench in the other hand, and the coffee spilled out all over the commander's clothes. And it was self-deprecating humor as he painted a very clear word picture of things that can go wrong when you're, even if you've been in weightlessness for a few months and you're not quite used to it.
All right. Let me get to you, Norm, and ask what might Dave be feeling now physically after that much time up there?
He won't feel differently in space. When he'll know the difference is when he comes back. It turns out the human body acclimates pretty readily to space flight, and you feel fine and normal. But those first few hours back on Earth are a big difference.
John, an email question from Farhana Sayed in Lahore, Pakistan. Farhana, thanks for sending this one. And it says, what is Russia likely to do with its space program after Mir?
They're going to get as closely allied with the United States and the international community as they can. I don't think there's much question about that. Russian officials, when I talked to them in Moscow, said, you know, the future of space, because it is so expensive to do the big, great things, is international cooperation. And they're, I think, for the most part, the Russians are pleased to be involved with the international community on the space station, even though they are very proud of the fact that they were first and that their space station has worked so well through the years. They think the future is got to be, just for financial reasons, working with everybody else who has any money at all to pitch into the pot to build something that goes to space, whether it's a space station like Mir or go back to the moon or Mars.
Well, Norm, when you were up there, I mean, you had a good look at Mir. Are you anxious to see how the new International Space Station will turn out? What lessons have been learned from Mir?
I am interested in that. I know that we have learned lessons from Mir. For instance, those electrical cables and air ducts that course through the open hatches and make leak isolation difficult in the case of something like the incident with the Spectre module are not done that way on the International Station, so that in the event of something like that, you can immediately close the doors. So there's no question we've learned a lot from the Mir.
Now, John, what do you think they're going to come back with as far as their inspection with this photoreflector, isn't it? That's
yeah, the spectrometer it's called. They don't know. I mean, the reason they're doing this is because they don't know. The first thing they'll do when they get outside is take photographs, or after they get the equipment out the door, is take photographs of specific areas on the side of the two oldest pieces of Mir. And after they've taken those photographs, they'll take this shoebox-sized spectrometer, hold it down on the piece of metal that they photographed, and then just let it kind of zap it and record the readings that are coming up from the surface of the metal. And they'll do that, they'll try to do it at 3 different places. They said the reason it's going to take 4 hours to take basically 3 2-minute-long photographs is you got to hold this thing perfectly still for 2 minutes. If you wiggle it at all, then you got to start over. And so they're thinking it may take 30 minutes to get each of the readings recorded in the spectrometer.
Now, if they're just heading out of the hatch now, John, when do you think we'll get to see the pictures of what's going on up there?
What they have to do is, because of the way Mir is set up for television transmission, it has to be, you know, here's Russia, here's Mir going around the world. It's got to be almost directly over Russia for the pictures to come in. They say that the first pictures might be available about 35 minutes from now, unless they get lucky. And so, you know, I'll be checking with you and our viewers. As soon as we get some pictures, I'll be glad to show them off.
Well, John, of course, it's always a pleasure to have you on Q&A. Thanks for helping us out with this show on Mir.
It's always fun to see you. It's always fun to see Norm Thagard.
And, of course, a pleasure to have you on as well, Norm. Thanks for taking part in the show and giving us your personal experience of what life is like up there, basically.
Thank you, Riz. Enjoyed it.
All right, thanks. Thanks to your viewers for taking part with your questions and comments. If you've got an idea or suggestion for Q&A, we'd love to hear from you. Drop us a line via the internet at cnni@turner.com. And thanks again for watching. Stay with us as the news continues here on CNN.
A spacewalk is underway outside the Russian space station Mir. A U.S. astronaut who has never walked in space before is learning from a Russian cosmonaut who holds the all-time spacewalk record. CNN's John Holloman joins us from Atlanta to talk us and walk us through what's happening. John.
I'll say, Judy, astronaut Dave Wolf has spent 2 hours outside the Mir space station taking readings on the surface of Mir's Cavant 2 module. The original plan was for Wolf to travel to the other end of Mir and take his readings on the Mir core module. This is where he and cosmonaut Soloviev came outside. They were going to get on a boom and come down here, but they didn't do that, and now they're back inside. Now, these are pictures we've not seen before that are being downlinked to mission control. That's Anatoly Soloviev. This is a picture that we actually have seen before. It's of the airlock hatch, which will come into view at the lower left-hand side of your screen, just as the hatch was opened about 2 hours ago. You see Soloviev's gloved hand there on the left of your screen, and if you look down inside the hatch, you can see astronaut Dave Wolf as he sticks his arm up in the direction of Soloviev about the word Mir on your screen. These pictures sent to the ground by Commander Soloviev as he and Wolf opened the hatch and came outside. We're told that these may, in fact, be live pictures. Okay, let's listen. Once again, back in Mission Control in Moscow, the video feeds that come down from space, from the Mir space station right now, are not absolutely like we're used to when the shuttle astronauts do a spacewalk. But while we've got this moment, Judy, NASA has translated some radio transmissions from earlier today as Wolf attempted to set up a device that he's supposed to use in the spacewalk, the spectral reflectometer. It's a shoebox-sized machine that will search for damage in Mir's hull. I want you to listen to this because you can see some of the consternation on the part of Mir's commander at the way Wolf is performing outside.
Anatoly, I'm afraid to move around here because the solar array is right behind me. David, I told you to give me very short answers. Anatoly, I heard that you were on location, but unfortunately I can't see you very well. Pardon? You will probably have to report the data the readings that David is going to read to you. You know, the dimensions are a little larger than we have place to allocate this unit here, so it's a little difficult to set this unit in the area where we are right now. The handrail is in the way.
It sounds to some people on the ground like Solovyev was getting a bit perturbed with Wolf's performance outside Mir. We heard him repeatedly warn Wolf not to step on the fragile solar panels, and at one point he ordered Wolf to give much shorter answers when they talked. You probably heard that in the translation that we just heard. CNN's Betsy Aaron is in Moscow. She has been monitoring this spacewalk along with many others of us in the CNN family. Betsy, as you look and listen at all this, are you getting the impression that Solovyev is trying to keep Wolf out of trouble?
I certainly am, John. It's awfully early in the morning here, and what we're hearing is a little bit of a father-son act. In the very beginning, Solovyev told Wolf, don't touch anything, just follow my orders. He was told not to speak in English in the beginning, only talk to the commander, only talk to the flight director. I think that Wolf is racing a little bit. I know that you saw this during his practice runs on the ground. He's excited. It's the first time he's done this, and they've got to calm him down. John, do you believe that in the last half of this spacewalk he's going to be able to calm down and get control of himself?
Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how long the spacewalk lasts, Betsy. They told us at the outset it would last 4 hours. I'm getting the impression they're going to bring these two men in a little bit sooner. They were supposed to go from one end of Mir down to the other end, and now they're just staying close to the end where they went outside. This is a picture of the tracking map at Mission Control in Moscow, and this is another picture that was sent to us from Commander Solovyev's camera early on in the spacewalk as the two men went outside. The goal of this was for Wolf to use this machine that we talked about, the shoebox machine, to bring back readings from several locations on the outside of Mir. That's what the machine looks like. But mission controllers have now, as we said, ordered the two to get back inside sooner rather than later. The other goal of this walk is to try to make an airtight seal in the spacewalk hatch. That hatch has been leaking slightly since a spacewalk in November. The problem with the hatch is that, according to some people who may know, it has 10 primary latches. A primary latch is here, 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 and here. And then there are 10 secondary latches, and you can sort of see the secondary latches in between the primary ones. The primary ones are opened by turning this wheel in the middle, and that's normally what they've always used in the past to keep the airlock shut. What they've tried to do since they discovered the leak is use these secondary latches in addition to try to keep the air that's inside the Mir space station inside. That has not been successful on any of the past tries that they have done with it since last November. Up next for Dave Wolf, after he gets back inside, finished packing for his trip home, which will come when Shuttle Discovery is launched to get him on January 22nd. Judy?
All right, John Holloman, fascinating stuff. Thanks very much. And Worldview will be back in just a moment.
Eigentlich ein ganz normaler Ausstieg, eigentlich Alltag für die Meerbesatzung. Doch was heute Nacht etwa 350 Kilometer hoch über Europa ablief, war mal wieder Bastlerarbeit für alle und eine Premiere für einen. Der Amerikaner David Wolf durfte zum ersten Mal raus ins All. Zusammen mit Anatoli Solovjow, Kommandant und Rekordraumfahrer, wurden die Macken an der Mir inspiziert, Verletzungen der Außenhaut und Materialabnutzung der Russen-Enterprise wurden gecheckt. Sieh her, sagt Solovjow, hier ist das Gummi etwas dünner. Routine und Professionalität im All, genau wie am Boden in Moskau. Keine Panik, keine Pannen, ganz anders als in diesem neuesten TV-Spot, der die russische Raumfahrt liebevoll bespöttelt.
Korrekt, aber dafür hat TV-Spielfilm jetzt ein Programm gehabt und ein Star gehabt. Da?
Prima findet auch der Franzose Eya, der Ende Januar den Amerikaner ablöst. Diese Woche wurde er mit der neuen Mannschaft präsentiert, inklusive Glaubensbekenntnis zur Mir. Ich vertraue der russischen Technik, denn dafür sprechen die Tatsachen. Tatsache ist aber auch, der 12 Jahre alte Raumveteran Mir muss nicht mehr lange durchs All rumpeln. Noch gut ein Jahr, dann wird die Mir ausgemustert.
Die Kollegen von der NASA waren ganz Ohr, denn diese Nacht gehörte vor allem dem Amerikaner auf der russischen Raumstation Mir. Mit 20-minütiger Verspätung kletterte David Wolf um kurz nach Mitternacht Moskauer Zeit durch die Ausstiegsluke in den offenen Weltraum. Zum ersten Mal und tatsächlich trotz aller Trainingsmaßnahmen wirkte das Lächeln unter dem Helm doch ein wenig eingeschüchtert. Wie fühlst du dich da oben, immerhin 400 Kilometer über der Erde, fragt die Bodenkontrollstation bei Moskau. Toll, erwidert Wolf per Funk und es klingt überzeugend. Zusammen mit seinem russischen Kollegen Anatoli Solovjow soll er mit einem sogenannten Spektrometer die Außenhaut der Station an 2 Stellen testen. Doch die Zeit ist knapp, denn ungefähr alle 30 Minuten gerät die Mir in den Erdschatten und die Kosmonauten müssen im Dunkeln pausieren. Immer wieder bricht die Videoverbindung ins All zusammen und Wolf kommt nur langsam voran. Nach 2,5 Stunden streicht die Bodenstation sein Arbeitspensum zusammen. Es reicht, wenn er die Außenhaut nur an einer Stelle untersucht, so das Kommando von der Erde. Von dort ist es nicht mehr weit zur Ausstiegsluke, der sich die Astronauten auch noch annehmen müssen. Sie ist seit dem vorletzten Weltraumspaziergang undicht. Vielleicht können die heutigen Aufnahmen endlich aufklären, warum. Kurz bevor David Wolf wieder einsteigt, noch ein schneller Gruß zur Erde. Dies war mein erster Weltraumspaziergang und ich kann Ihnen nur sagen, es war einfach großartig. Ich würde es sofort noch einmal tun. Viel Glück an euch alle da unten und ich sehe euch in ein paar Wochen auf der Erde, wenn hier oben hoffentlich alles nach Plan läuft. Und der Leiter des russischen Kontrollzentrums, Wladimir Solovjow, findet abschließend nur lobende Worte für den amerikanischen Weltraumspaziergänger. Er hat es gut gemacht, aber natürlich merkt man, dass er noch keine Erfahrung draußen im All hatte. Jetzt dürfen die beiden erstmal ausruhen bis heute Morgen um 10.
Astronaut David Wolf hat seinen ersten Ausstieg ins All absolviert. Zusammen mit seinem russischen Kollegen Solovjow verließ er in der Nacht fast 4 Stunden die Raumstation Mir. Dabei inspizierten die beiden Weltraumspaziergänger den Zustand der Station und untersuchten eine undichte Ausstiegsluke. Ende des Monats soll die nächste Crew die Mängel beheben.
Ground controllers say they're pleased with the spacewalk to inspect the outer hull of the Russian space station Mir. But the 4-hour mission involving Russian cosmonaut Anatoly Solovyev and U.S. astronaut David Wolf did not go off without a hitch. CNN's John Holloman explains.
Astronaut Dave Wolf's first spacewalk was not a cakewalk.
And start moving towards me. And look under your feet because there's a platform. Make sure you don't touch it with your feet.
In his 4 hours outside the Mir space station, there was a constant stream of orders from his Russian commander, Anatoly Solovyev.
And right underneath your hand, there's a star tracker. Don't touch it.
Commander Solovyev cautioned him again and again not to do anything to damage the station with its jungle of wires, antennas, and sensors.
Anatoly, I'm afraid to move around here because the solar array is right behind me. David, I told you to give me very short answers.
Despite the difficulties, Wolf remained upbeat.
Anyway, this is my first spacewalk, and I can tell you this is very spectacular. I'd like to do it again.
While they were outside, Wolf took 2 measurements on the surface of Station Mir with a spectro-interferometer, which he explained from outside the airlock as the spacewalk ended.
We have just used this instrument to measure the outside surfaces, how they have withstood the environment of space over the 12 years that this great space station has been operating continuously in orbit.
Wolf has now finished all his experiments. All he has to do now is pack everything up for his trip back to Earth at the end of the month. John Holloman, CNN Atlanta.
Rum ist der luftleere Raum, aber innen, in der Mir, kann man atmen wie auf der Erde. Ein Gemisch aus 78% Stickstoff und 21% Sauerstoff. Auch der Luftdruck stimmt. Etwas gewöhnungsbedürftig vielleicht der Gedanke, dass die Luft hier größtenteils noch dieselbe ist wie beim Start der einzelnen Module vor 8, 10 oder 12 Jahren.
Die ist sozusagen mitgebracht worden. Von 86 bis 96 ist die Raumstation ja in verschiedenen Teilen ins All gebracht und dort zusammengesetzt worden. Und alle diese Teile waren mit Luft gefüllt.
Der mitgebrachte Stickstoff ist von Dutzenden von Kosmonauten Millionenmal ein- und ausgeatmet worden. Er ist nur Füllmaterial, die Menge wird daher nicht weniger. Anders der Sauerstoff. 600 Liter braucht jeder Kosmonaut am Tag, bei Sport und schwerer Arbeit noch mehr. Und bei jedem Atemzug bleibt ein Fünftel der Menge im Körper. Wenn nicht ständig Sauerstoff nachgefüllt würde, müssten die Kosmonauten früher oder später ersticken. Die Russen haben sich deshalb ein trickreiches Recycling-System einfallen lassen. Besonders appetitlich ist es nicht, aber es funktioniert. Aus Brauchwasser und Urin gewinnen sie per Elektrolyse den Sauerstoff zurück.
Das wird aber so wieder aufbereitet, dass dieses Wasser von anderem Wasser, was an Bord ist, praktisch nicht zu unterscheiden ist. Nur aus psychologischen Gründen nimmt man es nicht als Trinkwasser, sondern führt es nach einem weiteren Prozess einer Elektrolyse, also einer elektrischen Spaltung zu und gewinnt aus diesem Wasser so wichtigen Sauerstoff für die Atemluft. Das ist aber ein infektfreies System, was sehr bewährt ist und sehr viel Transporte von Sauerstoff zur Station schon ersparen geholfen hat.
2 solcher Generatoren decken den Tagesbedarf einer 3-köpfigen Besatzung. Der Nachteil, sie verbrauchen viel Strom. Wenn die Solarpaddel nicht funktionieren, geht auch die Sauerstoffproduktion in die Knie. Für diese Fälle gibt es System Nummer 2.
Diese Kerzen sind Systeme, die sich auch in U-Booten so oder so ähnlich bewährt haben. Eine Zündpatrone zündet hier eine Reaktion in dieser Kerze und aus diesem Gitter tritt dann Sauerstoff aus. Und zwar Sauerstoff für eine Person, einen Tag.
So ganz ohne ist auch das nicht. Letztes Jahr geriet eine Sauerstoffkerze in Brand. Mit Mühe und Not konnten Ewald und seine Kollegen sich retten. Für den Notfall gibt es noch System Nummer 3. Versorgungsschiffe bringen alle paar Wochen Ballons mit Luft und Sauerstoff. Die kann man einfach auslassen, wenn die Luft zu dünn wird. Dicke Luft, so beteuert Ewald, gibt es nicht auf der Mir.
Das ist das Erstaunliche. Der Geruch ist eher technisch, wenn man dann noch Geruchssinn hat. Aber der Geruchssinn geht nach einiger Zeit, ob des sehr monotonen technischen Geruchs, sehr schnell weg.
Rund 100 Menschen waren schon an Bord der Mir. Für Tage, Monate, Jahre. Vor einem haben sie wirklich Angst, dass ein Leck ihre sorgsam gepflegte Atmosphäre in den freien Weltraum verpuffen lässt, wie es im vergangenen Jahr im Modul Spectre passierte.
Vor mehr als 27 Jahren wurde der Grundstein gelegt für gemeinsame Raumfahrtmissionen der USA und der damaligen Sowjetunion. Sojus und Apollo dockten im Orbit an, sogar eine gemeinsame Sprache wurde extra erfunden. Was damals unter dem Ungeist des Kalten Krieges nur wenig zukunftsträchtig schien, soll bald in eine gemeinsame ständige Raumstation münden.
12 Jahre umkreist die einst sowjetische und nun russische Raumstation Mir bereits die Erde. Ausflüge ins freie Weltall gehören schon fast zum Standardprogramm der Besatzungen. Doch immer öfter gehört zu den Außenbordforschungsaufträgen auch die Inspektion der Station selbst. Denn sie ist einfach überaltert, Pannen mehren sich, ständige Kontrolle tut Not. Die Messungen, die Kommandant Solovjow und sein amerikanischer Kollege Wolf jetzt angestellt haben, sie sollen wertvolle Hinweise geben für die Errichtung der gemeinsamen neuen Station Alpha. Wolf ist allerdings der vorerst letzte Astronaut, der von der Mir aus einen Weltraumspaziergang unternehmen konnte. Bis zum Baubeginn der Alpha im Sommer gibt es für die Amerikaner nun keine Gelegenheit mehr, dafür vor Ort Erfahrungen zu sammeln. Die Station Alpha, ein ehrgeiziges Vorhaben. Doch offenbar war man sich im Kreml wie im Weißen Haus darüber einig, dass es ein Land allein eher überfordern dürfte. Was lag also näher, als jene Kräfte zu vereinen, die einst vor dem Hintergrund politischer Interessen vergeudet wurden für einen Milliarden-Dollar und Rubel verschlingenden Wettlauf? Schon im Jahre 2002 soll Alpha die Erde umkreisen. Noch immer gewaltig die Kosten mit geschätzten 27 Milliarden Mark. Doch ist das gerade die Hälfte dessen, was jede Seite allein hätte aufbringen müssen. Er hätte sich das damals wohl nicht träumen lassen. John Glenn umkreiste am 20. Februar 1962 dreimal die Erde, der erste Amerikaner im All. 10 Monate nach dem Sowjetmajor Gagarin. Unterschiedliche Startpunkte, jahrzehntelanges Wettrennen, gemeinsamer Zieleinlauf. Und Glenn, heute 76-jährig, er will wieder dabei sein. Er hat sich freiwillig bei der NASA gemeldet, um die Auswirkungen der Schwerelosigkeit auf das Altern zu erforschen.
Hallo. Herzlich willkommen. Bitte Platz zu nehmen. Ja, hallo. Auch noch Frau Stemberger. Ist dieses schicke Stöffchen bereits im All gewesen?
Genau das Ding hatte ich mitgehabt. Jeder Astronaut kriegt für jeden Tag so ein T-Shirt mit und genau das habe ich mir ausgewählt und das gibt es bei der NASA, genau.
Sie waren ja segensreicherweise mit der NASA unterwegs. Würden Sie bei der Mir auch mitfliegen?
Ja.
Echt?
Sie nicht?
Nein.
Warum nicht?
Weil...
Ja, warum nicht?
Weil Schiss hätte.
Na, ja.
Und zwar bis hierhin.
Nein, so schlimm ist das
Ich
nicht.
würde
Erstmal als
nicht mal
Astronaut.
fliegen.
Nein, als
Das
Astronaut
sag ich
muss
jetzt
man natürlich gerne fliegen. Das ist keine Frage. Ich glaube, jeder Astronaut würde, glaube ich. Und die Medien übertreiben wirklich sehr stark bei der Mir. Es ist nicht so schlimm. Sie ist 11 Jahre da oben, sie ist gut gewartet.
Ja.
Wir haben zum Beispiel Parabel geflogen. Da ist eine Maschine, Boeing 707, seit 1959 fliegt die. Die wird ständig gut gewartet, die fliegt perfekt.
Ja. Ihr wart ja sozusagen auch parallel. Konnte man sich aus dem Cockpit kurz grüßen und sagen...
Es war wirklich mal eine Situation, wo die Mir-Station, die in etwa 400 Kilometer fliegt, und der Shuttle etwas näher zusammenkamen, etwa 50 Kilometer. Aber 50 Kilometer ist schon ein Stückchen noch. Ja? Also wenn man 50 Kilometer ein Auto oder so,
stimmt schon.
Kann man nicht sehen. Und wir haben es also nicht sehen können.
Ich lese ja nur so viel. Aber man sagt immer, da fliegt so wahnsinnig viel Schrott rum. Also haben Sie auch so Weltraumschrott gesehen? Wie sieht denn das aus?
Also erstmal muss man bedenken, der Weltraumschrott ist verdammt schnell da oben.
Ja?
Etwa 40.000 Kilometer pro Stunde. Das ist also
das kann Dieter Bohlens Ferrari auch. Da bin ich sicher.
Ja, ich denke, der ist noch ein bisschen schneller. Ja. Und das ist eine Geschwindigkeit, wenn das einschlägt. Ein kleines Stück, sagen wir 1 Zentimeter Größe, hat eine Knallwirkung wie eine Handgranate. Das heißt, kleinste Stücke machen wirklich große Wirkung. Also selbst ein kleinstes Stückchen würde schon die Wand eines Shuttles durchschlagen. Genauso wie so eine Mir-Station.
Julia, haben Sie Höhenangst? Haben Sie, das weiß ich, aber haben Sie auch Flugangst?
Manchmal denke ich mir beim Fliegen, wenn es das war, dann tut es mir leid.
Ja, uns auch übrigens. Aber würden Sie jetzt nur mal gesetzt den Fall? Nein.
Ich habe zwar eine Zeit gehabt, wo ich mir dachte, wenn ein Raumschiff, ein UFO kommt,
würde ich mich reinsetzen.
fliege ich sofort mit.
Ja. Aber wenn du mit dem blauen Klaus mitgehst, dann kannst du auch mit Ulrich Walter mitgehen. Ja?
Das ist mir zu...
Also in UFO würde ich mich nicht setzen, muss ich gleich sagen.
Ja, inzwischen würde ich es auch nicht mehr. Aber es gab eine Zeit, da habe ich...
Unsere Zeit reicht natürlich nicht um alle 88 Experimente hier. Wir haben ein physikalisch sehr interessiertes Publikum. Allerdings reicht die Zeit wirklich nicht. Nur eine Sache, Essen und Trinken an Bord kein Problem.
Kein Problem, nein. Weder das eine noch das andere.
Jetzt, und das ganz andere, also ich meine der umgekehrte Weg?
Geht auch, ja. Man muss dazu übrigens noch sagen, der dient aus 2 Gründen, das da hinten. Ja? Nicht nur sozusagen alles andere wegzubringen, man muss auch bedenken, der Schwerelosigkeit rübst mal nicht. Ja? Die Luft geht nicht mehr nach oben raus, weil normalerweise in der Erdschwere kommt ja die Luft nach oben.
Dann hat es sich ja doch gelohnt. Die wenigen 100 Millionen
genau,
Dollar.
Das muss auch hinten raus. Ja?
Gut, dass wir das wissen. Das ist übrigens die Weltraumtoilette.
Ja.
Was kostet so eine Toilette mit Entwicklungskosten?
Eine Toilette, wir haben insgesamt 5 Toiletten, also das muss man berechnen, und viele Vorversionen, alles zusammen 23.000 Millionen Dollar. Hat die NASA dafür bezahlt.
23 Millionen Dollar?
Ja, das ist richtig.
Für 5 Toiletten?
Plus Vorversion, ja, also das darf man nicht vergessen, obwohl das natürlich nicht mehr. Man muss allerdings auch sagen, die ist so gebaut, die wird wahrscheinlich in all den Flügen nicht kaputt gehen. Also die ist so sicher gebaut und das hat auch einen guten Grund. Denn es gibt eine Flight Rule, eine Regel der NASA, die sagt, wenn die kaputt geht, dann müssen die zurück, die Astronauten. Das ist also eine strenge Regel, können Sie sich vorstellen, aus verschiedenen Gründen, aber das muss gemacht werden, das ist wirklich so.
Könnt ihr das Foto noch einmal einblenden, nur einfach um eine ganz kurze Nachfrage zu stellen. Diese Bügel da an der Seite, muss man die sich über die Oberschenkel, Entschuldigung, wenn ich...
Ja, das ist natürlich, Sie können sich vorstellen, wenn Sie sich jetzt da draufsetzen würden und Sie würden bei Ihrem Geschäft da durch die Gegend segeln, dann wäre das sehr unangenehm. Ich hoffe, Sie können sich das vorstellen.
Nein!
Also,
auf öffentliche Toiletten geht, dann hat man das Gefühl, die haben auch schon eine gewisse Schwerelosigkeit.
Also,
wo ist denn da die Klobürste eigentlich?
Die ist rechts, die kann man gar nicht sehen. Also Sie können sich vorstellen, das A und O bei der ganzen Angelegenheit ist wirklich ein fester Sitz, ein Bombensitz, möchte ich mal sagen.
Ja.
Deswegen
keine weiteren Details. Das muss jetzt wirklich reichen. Ich habe völlig überraschenderweise hier ein Buch liegen. Das kenne ich noch unter dem Titel In 80 Tagen um die Welt. Das haben Sie umgeschrieben, das heißt jetzt in 90 Minuten um die Erde. Ein sehr interessantes Buch mit einer ganzen Reihe von Fotos. Viele oder alle selbst
gemacht? Was Sie gerade gesehen haben, all das, ich erkläre die Toilette, weil das ja wirklich eins der beliebtesten Themen ist. Wie isst man, wie schläft man, wie geht man auf Toilette? Und Sie werden sicherlich über Toilette gehen, muss man trainieren vorher. Es gibt ein wirkliches NASA-Training vorher, wie man auf die Toilette geht.
Ja, nein, wichtig! Es ist doch wichtig! Wenn man so unterwegs ist, Sie waren jetzt nicht so fürchterlich lange wie einige der Mir-Kosmonauten. Wie lange waren Sie im All?
Ich war 10 Tage.
10 Tage. Kann man persönliche Sachen mitnehmen?
Nein, das heißt bis auf 3 Ausnahmen. Man kann eine Brille mitnehmen, wenn einer eine Brille hat. Man kann CD-ROMs mitnehmen und man darf eine Uhr mitnehmen. Also ich habe zum Beispiel dieses T-Shirt und diese Uhr mitgehabt.
Ja, CDs auch, also Musik hören und so?
Ja, man kann also keine Bücher mitnehmen. Man kann entweder Musikkassetten oder CD-ROMs mitnehmen. Ich habe CD-ROMs mitgenommen. Übrigens, der CD-ROM-Player, der wird wiederum gestellt von der NASA.
Aha.
Also es gibt nichts anderes, was man mitnehmen. Bis auf noch 2 andere Ausnahmen. Man hat eine kleine, wie soll ich sagen, Schatulle, einen Beutel, der ist etwa so groß. Da kommen 20 Teile mit rein. Und von diesen 20 Teilen dürfen noch mal 2 einem selbst gehören.
Aha. Also alles sehr reglementiert. Ich würde gerne irgendwann mal einen Strip in der Schwerelosigkeit sehen. Weil wir haben uns überlegt, wie ist das eigentlich, wenn man sich die Hose auszieht, dann kann man wenigstens nicht mit dem Bein hängen bleiben, weil man schwebt ja sowieso pausenlos darum. Sieht vermutlich ein bisschen affig aus, aber es wird funktionieren.
Kommandant der Mir Solovjow hat an Bord der Raumstation seinen 50. Geburtstag gefeiert. Erste Gratulanten waren sein russischer und sein amerikanischer Kollege. Solovjow hält den Weltrekord bei Raumspaziergängen. Mit seinem Ausstieg gestern verbrachte er bereits 75 Stunden im All.
Russian cosmonaut Anatoly Solovyev celebrated his 50th birthday already there. The Mir space station commander got a message of congratulations from Russian President Boris Yeltsin on Friday and a gulp of cognac. Cake and candles were out of the question in zero gravity. Solovyev is history's most experienced spacewalker, logging 80 hours on 17 different spacewalks. He is on his 5th Mir mission with a total of 20 months aboard the space station.
Ist, dass man sagt, das Geld, das man in die Raumfahrt steckt, das braucht man für andere Projekte. Für dringende Projekte, die auf der Erde anstehen.
Für Arbeitslosenunterstützung.
Ressourcenverknappheit.
Nein, das Geld geht in die Arbeitslosenunterstützung. Aber wenn man Raumfahrt richtig managen würde, dann hätte man gar nicht so viel Arbeitslose. Denn die Aerospace-Industrie, die Luft- und Raumfahrtindustrie hat ja Tausende von Leuten entlassen müssen, weil sie keine Aufträge mehr bekamen. Und es ist eine Hochtechnologie, die über die Jahre hinweg neue Potenziale schafft, neue Wettbewerbsmöglichkeiten. Deutschland ist ein Land, das mehr und mehr im globalen Wettbewerb ausscheiden muss. Und alle die Lösungsangebote, die man so hört von den Politikern, die sind nicht mächtig, sind nicht durchgreifend, um auf dem Gebiet etwas zu tun. Deutschland verliert seine Wettbewerbsfähigkeit mehr und mehr, ist aus der Hochtechnologie ausgestiegen und nur hier und dort noch beschäftigt, um wenigstens Schritt zu halten mit dem Ausland. Das Ausland, Deutschland ist nicht schlechter geworden, aber das Ausland ist besser geworden und Deutschland hat nicht Schritt gehalten.
Also Sie haben ja Amerika mit Ihrer Forschungsarbeit geholfen. Jetzt kommen Sie doch nach Deutschland zurück und helfen Deutschland, eine Infrastruktur und eine Logistik aufzubauen, um das wieder zu pushen.
Das würde ich gerne, aber ich finde ich treffe hier nur auf taube Ohren. Die Öffentlichkeit interessiert sich enorm für die Raumfahrt bei Ihnen. Das Interesse an der Raumfahrt in Deutschland ist unglaublich. Gerade hat sich das wieder bei Mars gezeigt mit dem Pathfinder. Die Leute kommen zu den Vorträgen, die Leute schauen sich die Filme an, aber es passiert nichts. Was die Politik betrifft, was die Führung betrifft, herrscht nach wie vor Taubheit und
Ich möchte Sie zum Schluss etwas ganz Persönliches fragen. Es gibt von dem französischen Schriftsteller Saint-Exupéry ein Wort. Er sagt, die Sterne sind für die einen die Reisenden, Führer, für die anderen sind es kleine Lichter, für die Dritten, für die Forscher ist es ein Riesenproblem, für die Vierten, für die Kaufleute ist es Gold. Was sind die Sterne für Sie?
Magnete. Es sind Richtsterne, nach denen man sich richten kann. Nicht nur physisch. Und Saint-Exupéry hat hier als Pilot sich nach den Sternen gerichtet, navigiert, sondern auch psychisch. Ja, das ist, dass man wie die Magnete einen herausziehen, ständig ziehen. Man wird niemals ans Ende kommen, sie werden immer ziehen. Man muss sich aber von ihnen ziehen lassen.
For a Thursday evening launch of the Shuttle Endeavour. There were concerns bad weather could delay the launch, but the forecast improved and the chance of launch are now said to be 70%. Endeavour's mission is to rendezvous with Russia's Mir space station. Endeavour will pick up U.S. astronaut David Wolf and drop off his replacement, Andrew Thomas. The shuttle will also bring supplies and equipment to Mir, including a computer and an air conditioner. The docking is scheduled for Saturday. CNN plans to bring you live coverage of the launch at the time shown on your screen.
Willkommen bei Sternzeit, dem Astromagazin im Wetterkanal. An diesem Wochenende bekommt die Erde Besuch aus dem All, aber keine Sorge, es sind keine intergalaktischen Raumschiffe, die da vorbeirauschen, sondern eine Raumsonde, die von der NASA selbst auf den Weg geschickt wurde vor 2 Jahren. Sie kommt nochmal an der Erde vorbei, um Schwung zu holen, damit sie ihr endgültiges Ziel, den kleinen Planeten Eros, erreichen kann. Diese kleinen Planeten bevölkern das Sonnensystem in großer Zahl, aber sie sind so klein und so lichtschwach, dass man sie mit bloßem Auge nicht sehen kann. Und so wurden sie erst vor rund 200 Jahren entdeckt. Das ist der Kleinplanet Gaspra, der 1991 von der Raumsonde Galileo auf dem Weg zum Jupiter angeflogen wurde. Ein etwa 20 Kilometer großer Brocken, unregelmäßig geformt und von vielen Kratern, Einschlagkratern zernarbt. Und 2 Jahre später flog Galileo auch noch an dem kleinen Planeten Ida vorbei, der größer als Gaspra hier in der Fotomontage ist, ungefähr 50 Kilometer groß und auch von vielen Einschlagkratern zernarbt. Das sind Krater, die aus der Frühgeschichte des Sonnensystems stammen. Nun, die Raumsonde NEAR, NEAR steht für Near Earth Asteroid Rendezvous, also geschrieben NEAR, ist seit 2 Jahren unterwegs, hat einmal schon die Sonne umrundet und kommt nun wieder hier an der Erde vorbei, um Schwung zu holen, um umgeleitet zu werden in Richtung Eros. Diesen kleinen Planeten wird sie im Januar 1999 erreichen. Hier sieht man die Kursänderung nicht so sehr, aber wenn man sich das Ganze von der Seite anschaut, dann hat man hier die Erdbahnebene und Sie sehen, dass die Kleinplanetenbahnebene dagegen geneigt ist. Und die Raumsonde muss gewissermaßen aus der Erdbahn herausgeschleudert werden durch das schwere Feld der Erde. Eine Methode, die bei den Raumfahrtingenieuren sehr stark und sehr häufig jetzt angewandt wird, um Treibstoff zu sparen. Nun, die Raumsonde ist so lichtschwach, dass man sie natürlich mit bloßem Auge nicht verfolgen kann. Aber wo Sie in dieser Nacht die Sterne sehen können, das zeigt Ihnen wie immer unsere Karte.
Diese Sendung wurde Ihnen präsentiert von Spektrum der Wissenschaft.
And this rare shot of the Earth and Moon in the same frame. The swing by put NEAR on a course for the asteroid 433 Eros, which has a tricky orbit that's slightly out of whack with the orbits of the major planets.
It's hard to get into that orbit. If you go directly from the Earth, you would need a very large rocket to do that.
Instead, the slingshot effect of Earth's gravity will do the trick, keeping NEAR on a course for a January rendezvous with 433 Eros. The spacecraft will spend a year examining the 25-mile-long silicate rock which rolls through its eccentric orbit like a tumbling potato.
Studying it intensively, measuring its composition, measuring what it's made of.
We have ignition. We have liftoff of the Delta rocket carrying the NEAR spacecraft bound for the asteroid Eros.
Launched in February of 1996, NEAR is another of NASA's so-called faster, better, cheaper missions, which emphasize shorter development timelines and tighter budgets. NEAR's first mission was to visit the asteroid Matilda, a very dark object that reflects only 4% of the sunlight that hits it. But scientists are much more interested in 433 Eros, a larger rock they feel has more to tell.
There's a lot more I think we can learn there than at the small guys.
But why study asteroids? What interest could we have in them besides making sure none of them hits us? Well, scientists say the asteroids may in fact hold the solutions to many mysteries, including the early composition of the solar system and how the planets and life came to evolve.
So we don't know exactly what we'll find when we get there, but we hope to answer questions about the formation of the solar system, since the asteroids are remnants, primordial remnants of the formation of the solar system.
Images from the flyby are still coming in, and NASA plans to make a movie from the near encounter. Rick Lockridge reporting for CNN.